I guess where do you want to start? Do you want to start kind of chronologically? Should we start with Allende? Do we want to? I don't necessarily maybe have as many disagreements as you might think, but where do you want to start?
Well, what are your main disagreements with the whole liberalization process? Or maybe even if you can just pick out some stuff that you heard me say that you disagree with.
So on the portion where Pinochet was in power, that's the part you want to start with?
Sure.
All right. So I think that largely the growth attributed to Pinochet and Pinochet's economic reforms are largely exaggerated because most of the economic recovery that we see in Chile happened after Pinochet left office. This is after 17 years. You'd probably quibble with that and say 14 years of free market reform in Chile. I'd argue it's not free market necessarily, but neoliberal, but we don't have to debate the label of it. It led to a lot of economic failures, in my opinion. Unemployment was higher than it was under Allende. Poverty when Pinochet left office was higher than when he entered office. Actually, it was higher than it was prior to Allende. I actually haven't been able to find good numbers on the poverty rate under Allende. But then,
poverty numbers on Chile are very difficult to find. I know.
Yes, you've probably done the same research. Exactly. Yeah, it's hard to find the exact poverty numbers under Allende. But still, prior to Allende, the poverty rate is lower than it was at the end of 17 years of Pinochet. And I would attribute this largely to the lack of success of the so-called liberalization. And then after Pinochet left office, you saw moves towards what I would describe as like close to social democracy. You could still arguably call them neoliberal, but I think that we're questioning over it. It was not this libertarian-esque system that Milton Friedman would have been happy with, for example.
Right. So I wouldn't necessarily argue that. I definitely wouldn't argue that we should credit Pinochet for all the reforms. My point,
or even the Chicago school, the Chicago school.
Yeah, I would say the Chicago school, right? Because I know that most of the best economic growth we saw after Pinochet, and this is empirically true, like I mentioned in my opening statement. So there was actually a synthetic analysis that was performed, kind of like seeing the economic growth after it's shifted to a democracy. I don't have this pulled up because I think you would kind of agree with me anyways, like you kind of just did.
Is it the one that 40% of the poverty reduction was social spending? Is that the one you're talking about? And 60% was growth? Is that the study, the World Bank study you're referring to?
Oh, no. It was a synthetic control analysis. I forgot who performed it. I can pull it up if you want because it's Chile.
Well, you can tell me what were the findings first, and we'll see if I disagree with that necessarily.
I mean, it basically synthetic control approach on Chile's transition to democracy. So this is just the abstract, right? We use a synthetic control approach for performing a case study for the impact of economic reforms and democracy openness on Chile's GDP per capita. We use available data at the World Bank, World Bank data. Let's get to the point. We find a significant positive effect of the process of re-democratization on Chile's long-term GDP per capita. So that's kind of the main point. Like it goes a little deeper, but that's the main point I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think we hopefully both agree. Yeah, the re-entering a democracy or a partial democracy. There was still Chile didn't abolish non-elected senators until 2005, I believe. And this is, I mean, you had Pinochet was literally a senator for life until 2002. But so that's not actually what I was referring to. What I was referring to was in 1990, you saw the beginning of a break from the Chicago School of Thought. You saw, they increased the, corporate tax rate, income tax rate, the value-added tax rate. They closed tax loopholes on things like farmland. 100% of the increase in tax that came from those increases were spent on social programs. We saw a 17% increase in the minimum wage. We saw, this is all 1990 after Pinochet. Both spending on education, healthcare, and where's the other one? I forgot the other one. All increased by over 200%. These were a break from the Chicago School, and there is a lot to be said that it was a big part of why there was so much poverty reduction. Now, part of it was the growth in GDP, the growth from increased trade, so much capital coming in. That definitely did also help alleviate poverty. But also a huge part of it was the increase in social spending.
So what's the policies that you would have problems with that were implemented during the Pinochet years, which was 1973 to 1989?
I mean, hopefully I can start with one that we both agree on. He made it illegal to go on strike. This is what I believe a fundamental right of workers, the right to withhold labor, working together. He made that illegal. Now, I'd argue that that's certainly not free market. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I didn't even know that was a thing that happened.
Yeah, I have a source. I honestly, I expected you were going to ask for sources on literally everything. So if you want a source on anything, I got you. let's see. So I can send you that right now if you'd like, actually. Yeah, and so I think privatizing the pension system, I think that was unsuccessful, and I think we see that today because he didn't privatize the pensions for the military and the police. And sure enough, today the average police and military pension pay out 6 times more than the average civilian pension. Let's see, where is it? Here we go.
Yeah, I read a few things on the Social Security side. Now, from what I've seen, there was definitely better results that came for the people who used the private system as opposed to those same people before. However, there were some issues. They didn't really entirely privatize it. There was still a lot of bureaucracy that was in the Social Security system. I definitely would say they didn't go far enough with that. But from what I have seen, they did have generally good results from that. I had a few different, let me see. The main thing I read on that is actually from the United States Social Security, from the SSA, and they did an entire report on Chile's social security system and was actually pretty favorable. And they did point out, like I said, that it wasn't entirely privatized and it wasn't as privatized as people thought it was, and there was limitations on it.
Well, frankly, honestly, that's where I would argue that, and perhaps you'd agree with this, that Pinochet was less of a libertarian and more, I think most people think of him as like the beginning of the neoliberal era in a way, where it was government involvement to, I suppose, enhance private entities, capitalism. Yeah. But it wasn't really this hands-off government approach to the economy that I think that you would argue for. Am I mistaken on that or no?
Right. But so this is kind of doesn't really have to do with the debate necessarily. I mean, all this stuff is relevant, but what I'm trying to defend is the actual Chicago school policies. So like if you say, oh, well, he banned people from going on strike, then we can say, oh yeah, that was wrong. And maybe we can find effects of that. And of course, but that wasn't something that the Chicago school people told him to do.
Let's start with the most prominent one.
I'm trying to defend the actual liberalization and saying that was good and that led to good results.
Let's go with, in my opinion, the biggest failure of the Chicago school was Sergio de Castro. He was the Minister of Finance, I believe, and his decision to peg the peso to the U.S. dollar was a disaster, and it was one of the main reasons that Chile had their crisis in 1982.
Okay, let me see. I actually had something on that.
And this was, I mean, a huge setback for Chile. I mean, that was one of the reasons why the poverty rate was so high when Pinochet left office, was because of just that disaster. And also, you can argue that the increased flow of foreign capital led to a bit of a banking bubble. And this is part of the reason why the collapse was so severe. But basically, the catalyst for the collapse, though, was this was the recommendation of the Chicago school that was advising Pinochet to peg the peso to the U.S. dollar.
Okay, right. Yeah, so I would agree with this. So in 1979, Castro, like you said, the Minister of Finance, he sort of made this decision to abandon the free-floating exchange rate, which was what Friedman said to put in place in the first place, right? And
that is not accurate.
Yeah, no, like that was Friedman's thing. Like Friedman talked about this in multiple of his books, and that's why I actually had that one book pulled up, The Two Lucky People, his memoirs, because he has an entire chapter where he talks about this, and he criticizes De Castro for abandoning the fixed exchange rates, because Friedman is not for fixed exchange rates.
Let's start right away though. When was this book written? Let's just go right there. It was written after the crash happened, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is his memoirs. Wait, no, wait. But then during the actual time, Friedman has consistently, and he's been consistent in favor of a floating exchange rate in developed nations, but his position on developing nations is actually rather mixed. And there is, let's see, I will find it for you. For example, in Israel, he supported a fixed exchange rate. He referred to it as a unified exchange rate. So there is context for him supporting fixed exchange rates in developing nations. I believe it was pegging the shekel to, I think, the US dollar. I think it was, but let's see. I will link it for you in the chat right here. And in page 26, we have, and this is a couple years after the peso had been pegged, you have a specific quote from Milton Friedman going almost out of his way to not critique the pegged exchange rate. Now, if this was something that he truly, this is big economist. This is a big deal. If he is as good as he would say, you'd think he would have told these people while he's in Chile, literally giving advice that this was going to be a disaster, but that's not what he did at all. So it's on page 26, the most relevant part. So only Chile has in recent years effectively unified its currency with that of a major developed country. So that right there is almost an endorsement
what
of.
Did you say it was?
Page 26, and there's let's see, it's 26, and then you'll be able to see it because it's like put within, like it's a quote. And it's the one that's like actually numbered 26, like not what the like Google says. It's like on the page it says 26.
Oh, right.
Did you find it?
Yeah, I found it. Hold on one second.
So while you read it, I'll read it aloud for the people watching. This is a quote from Milton Friedman. This is after Castro had pegged the peso to the US dollar. Only Chile has in recent years effectively unified its currency with that of a major developed country. So effectively unified its currency. That is almost an endorsement of pegging the peso. Experience since I gave the lecture in Israel, where he suggested a unified currency for the first time, has not led me to alter my views on the economics of the issue, the superiority of the unified currency. Though it has led me to become far more modest about judging political feasibility in the sense of likelihood of adoption, perhaps the example of Chile, if its policy continues to be as successful as it's been so far, will lead other developing countries to follow. And the problem with this is that you actually already started to see the problems that ended up causing the crisis when Friedman was making this statement. So either he was uninformed on what was going on in Chile, or he was purposefully, I suppose, withholding criticism, maybe out of some loyalty to the Chicago school. Who knows? But I think it's inaccurate to say that this was against what Friedman was arguing for. But even, Friedman's not some like a saintly figure. There are professors at the Chicago school that have argued for fixed exchange rates. The most prominent one, Robert Mundell, a very prominent right-wing economist. He is very, very in favor of fixed rates. And so and he was professor at the University Chicago. So that was a mouthful. What do you got?
Can you define what a unified currency is for me?
So the way that he's defining it, it seems to me, because this is different necessarily than pegged, because this is actually, so in the final portion of the paper, in the conclusion section. So I'm definitely not attributing what happened to Friedman. I'm not saying necessarily it was his recommendation, but it seems to be that he was arguing for now his recommendation for a unified currency, usually it's my understanding, had to do with like the abolition of the central bank of the nation. Like he wanted that, and then basically to like almost use just the other nation's currency. It's my understanding that was his opinion of what should have happened in Israel, and that's sort of what he said about Chile too. But yeah, I just think it's inaccurate and almost like a hindsight bias to say that Friedman was in support of.
See, the thing here is like when you're unifying an exchange rate, it means basically unifying a currency. It means that you're sharing a currency with another nation, right?
No, it's not what Chile did. I know.
So like this isn't necessarily the same thing as just a fixed exchange rate. And definitely not quite what Chile did, because what Chile did was they overvalued their peso. And I think they actually had...
But I think I agree that that's not what Chile did, but I'm using Friedman's words here. Only Chile has in recent years effectively unified its currency with that of a major developed country. I agree that even under Friedman's own, this paper is actually, you'd probably find it really interesting because it's about Friedman's whole opinion on fixed exchange rates.
I actually had that paper pulled up just now because I was reading through some stuff on it.
That's really interesting then, that you had this, but you were still saying that he said in his memoirs, because this paper directly contradicts that.
It contradicts what he said in his memoirs. This was published about, like, what this quote was published about the same time, or a very similar time anyways.
No, this quote, that might have been when it was published, but that's not when it was like from. It was from.
The thing is, these are two different policies, like from what Chile was doing and from what Milton Friedman was recommending. Because
no, but he wasn't. Wait. No. I know what you're trying to say, but like we're going with what Friedman said. I know that that's not what Chile was doing, but Friedman. I mean, are you saying that Friedman was wrong then when he said that they had effectively unified their currency?
This isn't necessarily not having a. This isn't necessarily having just like a fixed exchange rate.
No, but we agree that
Chile, with a free floating currency, then you're effectively having a free floating exchange rate, right?
No. But we agree. Not really. No. We agree though that Chile never unified their
US
currency.
has a free floating
No.
exchange rate,
Do
right?
we agree that the Chile never unified their currency with the U.S. dollar?
No, not with the US dollar.
Exactly. But that no. But that is what Friedman is saying here in this quote. Only Chile has in recent years effectively unified its currency with that of a major developed country. We're both agreeing that Chile never did that.
See, what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to find information on what he's talking about specifically. Let me see.
I mean, there's context given,
because
around
I'm pretty
the quote.
sure Chile did change their currency at a point, because they actually the currency name actually changed and I'm trying to find the old name of the currency so I can find actually something solid on that. I wish I would have known, like, we were going to be arguing about this specifically, so I would have had that ready. I'm trying to.
So here's another quote here is, I believe this country has been notably successful during the last years without my advice, and I believe it will continue to be successful. So this is in 1981. This is after they had pegged the peso to the US dollar. So we can even forget that other quote. Friedman, this is, we're already seeing the problems of this overvaluation of the peso, but Friedman is not talking about them. And I think that that's a problem. And I think that when in his memoirs later, he says, oh, I told him not to do it, but we have quotes that he didn't do it. If I'm being honest, I think that Friedman probably did disagree with it, like personally, but felt they could get away with it. That's my personal take on it. And that's also the take of this paper, is that Friedman probably did think that they shouldn't be pegging the peso to the dollar, but he never voiced opposition to it in the number of times he went to Chile. The 2 times he went to Chile ever since they pegged the peso.
Yeah, he went to Chile like directly before, like in 1981. I was a little bit before.
Well, they pegged it in 79, so that's after.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm talking about. I meant before the recession.
Yeah, but you're already seeing the problems, though, from pegging the peso. Because that's the thing. He said his argument in his memoirs is, I told them not to do it. That's what he's saying. He said, I told them that they shouldn't do it. I warned them against it. But we have quotes from when he was in Chile while it was going on, and he didn't do that.
But isn't this quote from the 1990s?
No, that's when the book was published. It says right here, 1981.
You're talking about the quote on page 26, right?
Yeah.
Friedman's paper from the Monty Python Society in 1995.
I'm talking about this quote. I believe this country has been notably successful during the last years without my advice, and I believe it will continue to be successful.
Oh, which one's that? You said
it's page 26. It's like at the top of the page.
Oh, okay. I believe this country has been notably successful. Yeah, why is this necessarily relevant? Like, if he's like, okay, they're successful, like they were successful so far before the crisis happened.
I mean, it depends how you define.
He didn't know everything that was going on necessarily.
It depends how you define. But I mean, we can agree this is a pretty big deal. I mean, this led to the largest financial crisis that
right. I know it is a big deal.
So
that's why they should have listened to Friedman's advice in the first place.
But that's not the advice he gave, and that's the entire point of this breakdown. Is it details every trip he made to Chile, and this is not something he said. Like, he didn't give that advice. And I know that your argument is that he always supports floating exchange rates, but that's directly contradicted by what he supported in Israel.
Criticized De Castro on the fixed exchange rate. Because, I mean, they were going by that was like Friedman's policy in the first place, right? Because they had a free floating exchange rate after Friedman.
I mean, they'd had it under Allende too. It's my understanding that they consistently just had one. This was like what Castro did was a break from just like Chile's history. I could be wrong on that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't think they had it under Allende.
What do you think was pegged to the dollar? Could you source that?
Let me see. Oops, I'm reading the wrong part. No wonder I can't find it. Where is it? Performance. Hold up. I'm just trying to find where I was reading from again. Departing from Friedman's support for free-floating exchange rates. Okay, I think I got something. Let me just pull it up real quick.
Let me hear it.
The political economy of unilateral trade liberalization. So this is what's sourced in the Wikipedia. I don't want to just read the Wikipedia and say this is true, so I'm just going to the source, right?
Okay, go for it. I don't mind if you read the Wikipedia.
Said this was Friedman's policy, right? So I'm just going to the source to make sure I can find where it says that this is a National Bureau of Economic Research paper by Sebastian Edwards, which was, he's the author. I'm pretty sure he's the author of that other one, isn't he?
Oh gosh, I don't know. But
yeah, he is.
Let's
he's the author of like several papers I have pulled up actually, because he's like one of the top.
That's really interesting though, because he's like, I mean, we can just go through the conclusion. I mean, his what he's saying is supporting what I'm saying here.
See, like I agree with him on. See, what we're arguing here, this is kind of a bit of a rabbit trail, because I'm trying to defend like the actual liberalization. I'm trying to defend free market policies. So this wouldn't be a policy I'm defending. I'm just kind of disagreeing with you on whether or not Friedman was supporting fixed exchange rates, which, I mean, if he did support them, I would disagree with that, obviously. And I would say, yeah, that was a bad policy. And I'm not going to defend that. And that's not really relevant to my point.
So I guess
you're on liberalization.
You're arguing then, I suppose, that it's almost I don't want to say waste of time, but like, say I can prove to you this was Friedman. Friedman had before supported fixed exchange rates in developing nations. You would say, all right, I disagree with him on that. Like that's like, you're telling me that like that's where this would go, like best case scenario.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so I encourage you to go the conclusion of this paper. It basically just cements what I'm saying, probably more articulately than I've been able to.
So he wrote an essay in 1953, "The Case for Flexible Exchange Rates."
Yes,
and this was an entire essay, like beforehand, that was supporting the free floating exchange rates.
And so that's what this paper breaks down, is that he had historically always supported them in developing nations. It wasn't until he had been giving advice to developed nations. It wasn't until he'd been giving advice in developing nations that we saw a break of that. The first time was with Israel. And I think he like supported like a creeping pegged rate is what he described in
I still
Yugoslavia.
Disagree with your labelization as currency unification as the same as just a fixed exchange rate.
It's not. Wait, no. Wait, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm definitely not.
I mean that is what you said. Like you were reading this and you were saying this is where he's saying Israel should have a fixed exchange rate, but then he just said Israel should have a unified currency. Is that not what he said?
So he puts forward basically his opinions for like what a unified exchange rate, and Chile never met those standards. But when he spoke on Chile, he always spoke of it as if they had a unified exchange rate, if that makes sense. Like I agree, they never unified their currency. I'm not saying that Chile ever did. But when he spoke on it, he referred to it as. And there's another, there's a essay Friedman wrote in here that's detailed, and it's called, I think it's called like Israel and Chile, one solution, two different outcomes, or something like that. And he basically goes over. This is like, I think it was like written in like '88 or something. So after the crisis, and it's him basically, I guess, going over like where he think like this policy he thought would work in one area didn't work in the other. Like I said, I encourage you to go through this whole thing. I'm trying to find the.
Yeah, I'm going to go through this other paper that was linked on Wikipedia. It's too long for me to go over now. I'm just trying to search through it. But it talks about his essay in 1953, and I don't know, supposedly this is the one that talks about this.
So also,
it's going to be too long. Okay, yeah, I mean, we can just agree this isn't super relevant. Like, I would disagree with that policy anyways, because I'm just trying to defend the actual free market policies.
So, yeah,
when I'm asking you, like, what policies are you against that I'm supporting, that I'm trying to defend? Like, if you're just going to, he was against strikes or a fixed exchange rate, obviously I'm against both of those things and I'm not going to defend them, right? I was just defending Friedman himself, but that's not the debate. It's not defending freedom. Obviously, I disagree with Friedman on a lot of stuff. He was a statist, stuff like that. I'm an anarchist. He was Chicago school. I'm for the Austrian school. There's plenty of disagreements. And I'm actually friends with Milton Friedman's son. And I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't. No, I had no idea.
I like him a lot better than Milton, actually. But anyways, back to the discussion. So that's what I want to know. I want to know what of the like actual free market reforms do you disagree with? Because from what my understanding was. That's what the debate was going to be about, right?
I mean, yes, I would argue that this was. I mean, you said Chicago reforms, and in my opinion, the most detrimental one was the pegging the peso. But I would argue that's not necessarily like a right or left thing. I think it was just a bad policy. I mean,
that's not part of a. That's not really a Chicago School of Economics thing. You know,
I disagree because there are
that would be like a personal thing. That's not part of the actual Chicago School.
So like I said, Robert Mundell, professor, University of School, hugely in favor of fixed exchange rates. The other person, I'm not even going to try and say his name. It's something with a K. Also in favor of fixed exchange rates. So and obviously we had Sergio de Castro trained at the University School of Economics. And then I pulled up a few examples of Keynesian economists and a left-wing economist supporting floating exchange rates. Now this was in the context of Venezuela, but it was basically to show that this is not necessarily like a free market versus left or right thing. I would push back that like a floating exchange rate is necessarily like a right-wing thing when there are, I think it's a little more, I guess it can be unorthodox with who supports it and who doesn't, is what I'm trying to say. Like, I question whether or not pegging the peso to the dollar is necessarily like a left-wing thing to do, or that a floating exchange rate is a right-wing thing to do.
And the first things I searched, like when I searched Robert Mundell, was saying that he supported, an advocate. Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, Robert Mundell. No, this is not controversial.
Has always been an advocate of fixed exchange rates.
With Friedman, maybe you can try and make, like I said, Friedman definitely supported in developed nations. But Mundell, he was very, very supportive of fixed exchange rates. And this also, I mean, he basically was one of the front runners in supply side economics. This is it's a right wing economist, and he was a professor at the University of Chicago.
Okay. Anyways. Yeah, we can get back to the whole free market thing because that's kind of the point. I wish we would have thought of that a bit sooner. But anyways.
So for sure. So basically, I would.
Yeah, go ahead and give me anything you actually disagree with as far as like the free market policies.
Oh, I mean, he took a sledgehammer to their health policy. He took a sledgehammer to the public pension system. I think he privatized a number of banks. Actually, he nationalized the several after the crisis because to prevent even further economic collapse. I think that
nationalized like 3 banks and then reprivatized them later on.
But it was, like I said, it was to save from a further economic collapse. But I think that I think that we see these outcomes, and I guess I disagree with this concept that, like what I'm saying is the privatization. I don't think it led to the economic outcomes that people like to say that it did. I mean, I guess that's my critique, is that there was this enormous amount of I believe he completely got rid of like unemployment benefits. He slashed just overall government spending and everything except for the military. I think this just wasn't helpful for Chile's economy, and I think that we saw that after Pinochet left and they started to do some more moderately social democratic policies. That's when we saw the real growth happen.
So there obviously was a large turnaround after Allende left office, to put it mildly. So you think that wasn't led by the reforms?
I think a huge part of it was an influx of private capital, which I think we can both agree was a lot of that was withheld while Allende was in power. Like you can say they did it because they thought it'd be a bad investment, but I mean I think that was a huge factor. You did have the CIA there for 3 years, fomenting everything they could to as much economic anxiety, as much economic troubles as they could, to create a coup. And now I do also think that there was some mishandling on Allende's part. There's also some bad luck. I mean, 25% decrease in copper prices when he's in office. That's when you're spending as much as he was, that's going to hurt the economy. So I think it's a lot of things. I also think that there were some problems with the way he handled land reform. And now that wasn't also exclusive to him though. Like 20% of, I believe the land that was meant to be reformed had already been, expropriated before Allende had even been in office. And
right.
So I wouldn't put that solely. I wouldn't even put that solely on him.
And the price controls.
Price controls. I mean, we can talk about price controls. It was, I mean, Pinochet, his first when he got 1974, he got rid of the price controls, and we saw inflation go even higher than it had been under Allende.
You think getting rid of price controls causes inflation?
How do you think inflation is calculated?
No, I mean, can you answer the question? Do you think getting rid of price controls causes inflation?
I think that some people have said that it's contributed to the rise of inflation. Yeah.
I haven't read anything about that.
Let's see. I can try and find this.
I mean, you think?
I made a whole bunch of claims there. That was like a very last minute thing. Like forget the last part about the 1974, because it sounded like you think that like he was like continuing what Allende did for the first year in office. I don't think that rabbit hole is necessary.
For the most part, I said for the most part.
I've seen. I mean, there's a 10% decrease in government spending, initially, and so I think that that's definitely not continuing what Allende was doing. But I think that, like, what about everything I said just prior to that?
I don't remember everything you said, honestly.
Do you remember? Were you listening to any of it?
Yeah, I was listening to it, but I was
all right. What do you disagree with?
Trying to read something. Okay. So, like I said, okay, you said there was an influx of private investments. Obviously, that's true, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, of course, like if you go a more privatized route and a more free market route, then you're going to have a lot more investments. But obviously, those investments also didn't happen immediately, and you were already having a lot of investments put in by the Soviet Union. And in fact,
I mean, not even remotely. No, wait. Let's not pretend. The Soviet Union was not even putting remotely the support that came in under Pinochet. Like, we can both agree with that, right? The amount that came in under Pinochet was not even remotely close to what came in from the Soviet Union under Allende. We can both agree with that, right?
How much came to Pinochet in the first 2 years?
The first, like after the Chicago School started becoming, because that's like where that's what we're saying.
I said my whole point was the economy immediately started recovering after Allende.
So what even is your claim then? You're saying
immediately,
but you're saying that
you
no. This is
yourself,
actually super
right?
important. This is super important.
The two immediate reforms were lowering government spending and getting rid of price controls.
But your claim
that the economy immediately started recovering after Allende.
Well, also what happened was the CIA stopped doing everything they could to foment a coup.
So that changed the economy. What did the CIA that changed the changed the economy?
Oh wait, okay. This is
anyways.
That drastically? I mean, for 18 months, the CIA was funding in a majority of different sectors to get trade unions to strike. They were funding a number of propaganda outlets to get people to withhold.
The CIA did not fund anyone to strike. That is not true.
I will give you a source.
True. If you read the Church report,
I'll give you a source for that.
It's not in the report at all. That is not in the report. I read the Church report. It's not in there. In fact, it literally.
What do you think the claim is? There was $8 million the CIA spent.
Did you read the Church report?
There's $8. Well, no, I'm asking. What do you think the $8 million was spent on?
The $8 million was mostly spent on propaganda against Allende. It
wasn't to foment strikes. One of the biggest things that led to the economic slowdown was the transportation strikes that took place.
If you actually look at the numbers of strikes, they didn't actually increase that much after Allende. There was already strikes.
Wait, after Allende, Pinochet made it illegal to go on strike.
No, I mean after Allende was in office.
Yes, there was a transportation strike, 23 days of the transportation being completely halted in the country. That's going to lead to inflation.
Are you talking about the truck strike, those 24 days?
Yeah.
The truck strike, what about it?
You don't think that contributes? You don't think that a nationwide truck strike?
No, yeah. I mean, people were striking because Allende's economy was so bad. Like, it was already bad before that point.
This was with CIA support, though.
No, there was no CIA support for the trucking strike.
There was CIA support for the trucking strike.
Did you read the Church report? Because it's not in there.
And also, but even if let's just say it's just fomenting propaganda to tell people to go on strike, that is support for the strike.
When did they tell people to go on strike?
This is let's see, the name of the propaganda outlet was I believe it was El Mercuria. I can't pronounce it. Let's see, it's right here. I haven't. Let's see, a New York Times article for you right here that outlines it all. I'm curious though. So, do you think that the propaganda didn't have any sort of impact? Or I mean, we're talking like top members of the government being assassinated. You don't think that led to like economic anxiety, things like that?
Can you prove it led to economic anxiety? That's the point. You're supposed to be proving this. Like, you don't ask me,
wait, no. I'm just kidding. I'm curious though. Do you not think? I mean, I think that
I would like to see proof for it. That's what I asked for.
But what would you accept?
I would like to see proof that they funded the trucking strike, or proof that they told people to strike. Because I looked into this and I couldn't find anything for this. I read the Church report, and they specifically in the report they actually stated like that this was against like their whole thing. Like if they were like funding trucking things, that was like that was against their regulation.
Explain the logic of that. What they were trying to do was not get workers to go on strike.
No, what they weren't going to do was fund people to go on strike.
Here's an article for you detailing.
And they didn't. So the
people did go on strike.
Number of strikes in 1970, 1,819. Number of strikes in 1971, 2,696 strikes in 1972. The economy was already on the downturn, like you pointed out again, and there was already strikes going on, but they just got significantly worse under Allende because
Wait, so
He was a lot
so we
worse
agree.
than
So wait, was your claim that there weren't that many strikes under Allende, or that there is an increase in strikes?
There was an increase of strikes, but I was
Okay.
pointing out that strikes were already happening. So this whole thing that strikes were just happening because they were being funded by the CIA is not true.
I just cited your source of saying that, yes.
CIA is linked to strikes in Chile.
Central intelligence agencies secretly financed striking labor unions and trade groups in Chile for more than 18 months before President Salvador Allende was overthrown.
Washington. Intelligence resources revealed today. What intelligence resources? Because this was not in the church report, right? And that's where most people, that's where even left-wing people cite their stuff on like CIA intervention. And it's not in there. Like they literally debunked this whole claim.
No, this is right here. The Central Intelligence Agency secretly financed striking labor unions and trade groups in Chile for more than 18 months.
This with no evidence. I know people have been claiming this. I'm saying it's not true. People claim things all the time. It's not true.
Let's see.
I was on the Wikipedia page and I saw this whole thing where it's like,
okay, I'm afraid going through Wikipedia, I'm afraid might not go everything. Can you show me what you're saying that this has been debunked?
Like I said in the church report, I was reading Wikipedia and I saw
this
claim.
You're just saying in the church report.
What I'm saying, I was reading the Wikipedia. I saw this claim that you're making. It was agreeing with you. I'm not saying Wikipedia debunked you. I'm saying it agreed with you. And then I saw that the source, it said that it didn't pass examination. So I read the source and I saw that it disagreed with what it was saying. And hold on,
This is right here. This is from a number of testimonies. This is from a number of testimonies that were done in I believe congressional testimonies. Let's see. One official with firsthand knowledge of the decision making on Chile strongly defended the intelligence agency's involvement with trade unions and organized strike. Of course, the agency tries to support people who believe in its aim. In the taxi cab driver strike, our goal is to make sure that, let's see, why does it stop? The strike is not going to fold. There we go. The driver on strike is not going to fold. The strike money was used to supply subsistence for people who believed in what you do. The CIA was funding people to go on strike so that they could support it.
Would you say the church report is a reliable source? Because I'm pretty sure you cited the church report in your video on TikTok.
Can you respond? Yeah, the church report.
I'm pulling it up. I was trying to find it.
But you're not responding to what I'm saying. You're saying, well, what about?
Yeah, because I was reading.
The church report.
I have no clue what you said because I was reading.
I feel like this isn't going to work if you're not like listening to what I'm saying. Like before, I said a bunch of stuff.
No, you asked me to find a source, and that's what I was doing. So I'm pulling it up right now. I had to find it. I have a lot of links pulled up. And you can't read stuff
within the church report.
I'm listening.
Within the church report, we have that the CIA funded $8 million in propaganda and different agitation tactics to foment a coup in Chile. And that's also where you have the quote where Richard Nixon told CIA director to make their economy scream. That's what I cited in the video.
So this is what it says in the church report. Verbatim. It has been stressed that the CIA had nothing to do with the truck owners' strike and the disorders that led to the coup. The question of the CIA's support to the Chilean private sector groups is a matter of considerable concern of the violent tactics used by several of these groups and their effort to bring about the military intervention. It says a few more things down here.
This was a testimony given. I'm sorry if you don't like some of the things that are said in the church report, but this is testimony given by officials with firsthand knowledge that they supported the taxi
I don't
cab
like
strike.
some of the things that was said in the church report.
No, that they funded people during the taxi cab driver strike.
So now you're talking about an entirely different thing.
No, I said the transportation strike.
Because I asked if you meant the truck strikes. Now we're going to have to go to the taxi strike.
I apologize if I accidentally said trucking strike. But I'm almost 99% sure I said transportation strike. This refers to things like the taxi driver strike.
The Chilean ministry. I still see nothing in here about them funding any strike. In fact, multiple times it's saying no
Wait,
one was
wait.
they weren't
Right
funding
here.
people to go on strike.
Control F. Control F. All right.
Yep, I did.
Okay. So type in taxi strike.
Yeah, I looked under taxi. It talks about the taxi strike. It doesn't say anything about funding.
Okay.
21%
So,
of all
taxis. I'm trying to find the best way for you to find this. Type in subsistence into F. The paragraph should start with, of course, the agency.
Wait, are you reading the church report?
No, I'm not reading the church report. I'm reading the article I linked to you. I feel like we're talking. I feel like we're no. I feel like we're talking about two different things here. I sent you an article. No. I don't want to talk about the church report. I don't want to talk about the church report. I don't want to talk about the church report.
Why not?
I sent you
I sent you wrong.
No, I sent you an article to substantiate
my. The church report is not wrong. Okay, so you just conceded my argument.
No, wait. I sent you an article to substantiate my claim that the CIA funded strikes, and you've been talking about something that I haven't been saying this entire time. I am sending you an article right now. Can you please look at that source, please?
Because my issue with this was just an article published by the New York Times.
No. This is
1974.
Yes, after
most
the coup.
Of this was just stuff people were alleging at the time, right? The church report was the thing that actually went in depth and explained everything that was actually going on.
This is quotes from CIA officials.
So you're talking about the.
Can you please just read the source?
The CIA is linked to strikes in Chile.
I have a quote for you to type.
That article is this the article you're talking about?
So
CIA
it says
is linked to strikes
subsistence for people. Just type in that into Control F.
Strike money was used. Of course, the agency tries to. Wait, hold on. One official with first-hand knowledge of this making Chile defendant the intelligence agency involvement. What official?
This is from an entire conference that was given. Oh my god! I'm sorry if you can't read this whole thing.
No,
but here's the thing: the entire conversation stops every time you have to read every article. I'm sending you. This is a direct link from a CIA official. I'm sorry, they didn't list his name right in the section that you're reading.
Okay, so basically you want me to accept this anonymous source over the entire report that detailed exactly what the CIA did that came out years later after the CIA was done in Chile. Is that what you're saying?
These are CIA officials. These are CIA officials saying.
It doesn't even give a name of someone. It doesn't
give. Didn't read the thing.
I did read it. I just read it. It just says the official.
It was at a news conference on Monday night with Gerald Ford, the president at the time. Or actually, no, the vice president at the time. No, it's the president at the time.
No, this says, in fact, the Times sources agreed. So this goes to sources. This is not at the news conference. That's not true. You can't say this was at the news conference when in the following paragraph, after it talks about the news conference, it changes the subject. And
they're corroborating it, though. They're corroborating
An anonymous source is corroborating it. And then when we actually have the data and all of the information on what the CIA did in the church report, which you have cited and which you just agreed a little while ago.
I have cited the church report before.
Okay, so is the church report right or is it not? Do we trust the random anonymous source that happened back in the 70s, or do we trust the church report?
Does the church report say that they didn't fund the taxi cab driver strike? Can you show me where it doesn't
say specifically they didn't fund the taxi driver strike? It says they didn't.
What are we saying here then?
It doesn't mention the taxi driver strike that much, right? It mostly talks about the trucker strike, but it never says that they funded strikes.
They supported people to go on strike, and also funded. Let's say it all went to propaganda. Let's just say it all went $8 million went to propaganda, telling people to hoard food so that they don't put it into the stores and all the things. Do you think that had an impact on the economy? Do you think that the top generals in the military who didn't support a coup, them getting assassinated, do you think that had an effect on the economy? Do you think any of this had an effect?
It financed activities covering a broad spectrum from simple propaganda manipulation. Expressed large-scale support for Chilean political parties from public opinion. So it says here that most of the propaganda was aimed at supporting more right-wing political parties, right? This wasn't stuff telling people to hoard food. This wasn't stuff telling people to go on strike. This was saying, this is
there was stuff telling people to go on strike and telling people
so
to hoard
if someone
food.
pops up and they're like, hey, here's a Trump ad. This isn't saying, hey guys, tank the economy. It's saying, hey, Trump is better and this is why, blah, 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 whatever, right?
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
No. Okay. Let's say for some reason that $8 million worth of propaganda, they were doing it for some other reason. When Nixon said, let's make the economy scream, and they were putting in propaganda, they didn't think it would hurt the economy. Let's ignore all that. Do you think top Chilean officials being assassinated who didn't support the coup, do you think that
in the report, it has the finances in the report, by the way. $8 million propaganda for elections and other support for political parties.
I've said 8 million this entire time.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's saying that $8 million went to propaganda for elections and other support for political parties.
There's propaganda, things like that Salvador Allende is going to crash the economy and things like this too. So like a large part of the economy is like consumer confidence. Can we agree with that?
Saying he's going to crash the economy isn't telling people to hoard food.
Okay, all right. Do you think that assassinating top officials, do you think that is going to foment some negative economic outlook?
Which one was assassinated?
The most prominent one was Schneider. He was a military general that was opposed to a coup. He was assassinated.
CIA knew all the claims the groups have received conflicting testimony about the extent of CIA. Wait, oops, sorry, I skipped a part. About with the abduction and the constitutionalist chief of staff of the Chilean army, General Ryan Schneider.
We're not even talking about the Chicago school. Frankly, I didn't think that this would be as contested as it is. The idea that the CIA was trying to foment a coup. This seems like rather non-controversial. Let's talk about Chicago.
Well, I knew that you were going to blame all of Allende's failures on the CIA, so I did a bunch of research on the CIA, and I actually brought up the data. I went over the church report, and just none of the stuff you're saying is true.
No, that's not true. That's not true. Okay, I will put this link. Anyone can go Google this. This is the CIA official saying that they funded strikes. But let's people can go look this up.
The anonymous.
Okay, no. Let's keep going though. I didn't say it was just the U.S. I actually listed a number of things, didn't I?
No, I said the anonymous source.
No. You said that. I was going to say the U.S. was the entire purpose. Is that what I said?
Oh no, I mean that was my
a straw man of my position.
My expectation, because that's what you said before when you made the video.
I've said before that the CIA did hurt.
You blamed the CIA.
Yes, I do think that the CIA had a large part of it, but I also think that the decrease in copper prices. I think that Allende had poor handling of the land reform. I think that there was a lot of it done. Okay, can you respond to the fact that the vast amount of the economic recovery came after Pinochet left and the Chicago school policies were implemented, and then it was when more moderate social democratic policies were implemented? Especially a large portion of the poverty reduction.
Let me see. Poverty. I mean, it began pretty rapidly after the recession recovery, from what I remember. And I mean, again, like this is one of the reasons I expressed in the beginning how the authoritarianism of Pinochet wasn't popular, yet more people supported keeping in Pinochet than people who voted in Allende. Like 44%. That's a lot of people, especially.
So this is. I mean, do you? I'm just very curious now. Do you accept like opinion polls and like what people like support? Do you accept that as like arguments of whether or not something is successful? Because I was under the impression that you did not support that. Then please don't use. Then please don't use that as an argument. No. If you don't accept that as an argument, then please don't use it as an argument.
Poverty rate in 1987 was 45%. Poverty rate in 1990 was 38%. That's a pretty drastic drop. And actually, that was probably the biggest drop. Yeah, this is, hold on. ResearchGate, poverty.
The vast amount of the poverty reduction came after Pinochet left office. I mean, this is not, this is just empirically true. But yeah, he was in office for 17 years. The
fastest reduction within a short period was while Pinochet was in office, which was 1987. From what I can see, this doesn't go later than that.
And what specific reforms do you think attributed to that reduction in poverty?
Getting rid of price controls,
No,
opening up
no.
free
That
trade.
wasn't true. That wasn't true in 1987. They had already done that.
No. I know they already did.
So
that,
I'm saying what happened in 1987 to 1990.
All right, let me give you sort of like a thing. All right. So you start these reforms back in 1975, and sometimes it's going to take a bit to see results from drastic reforms. We already know that, or at least positive results, because it was already predicted. Like Milton Friedman even expressed, like you're going to see unemployment. You're going to see more unemployment at first when you go through a whole like shock therapy. So things in the short term like that were to be expected, right? But at this point, this is 14 years or so after the reform started in 1988, right? So you have this period where they're bringing reforms and things are improving, but then mainly due to the one issue with the fixed exchange rates, you have the recession, which obviously increases poverty, increases income inequality.
Well, no. But I
and then
push back,
after that, things just improved.
No. Okay, I'm gonna push back on this though, because
that was 82. So that's
recession,
another 5 years until 1987.
Exactly, another 5 years. And so I'm saying, what happened from 87 to 90 that is this poverty reduction that you're talking about? What did Pinochet do?
The economic reforms were continued, and they had a chance to recover from the recession.
That's not an answer. Can you please tell me? Can you give me a few specific ones?
Do you want me to read the reforms out to you or something?
No, I want some reforms that happened in 1987.
No, I'm saying the reforms they already started contributed.
Okay, wait. So your argument is that
the issue was the fixed exchange rate, right? I'm saying the actual reforms, which again, I said free trade, getting rid of price controls, mainly. There was more privatization. I'm not sure everything they privatized, like you said, they privatized. They kept
one of the main things that kept them afloat. One of the main things that kept them afloat during the recession was the copper mine that they kept nationalized, Codelco or whatever. It was responsible for 85% of exports during the recession. So, I mean, this is actually the fact that he left that nationalized was a huge thing that kept them afloat.
Kept the government afloat, not necessarily country.
No. I mean, he had cut all benefits for the people. So yes, it was keeping the government afloat because he decided that unemployment benefits, again, things like that, those people weren't getting those anymore.
You said the most drastic reductions came after 1990, and I'm just saying that's kind of misleading, right? Because there was more years after 1990. There's more years from 1990 to now than there were from 1982 to 1987, right?
Can you please tell me what specific policies were led to this?
I'm correct. Are you going to concede that you were wrong about that?
Wait, no. The larger portion of
changing the subject.
No, the larger portion of poverty reduction
you said was
this has been my entire argument that the largest portion of poverty reduction happened after the Pinochet was out of power.
Based on what? Largest portion based on what? What is this metric you're talking about?
From 38% down to, I believe it's currently like at depending, the source I saw was like at 3.6% if you're going by like $550.
Okay, so you're just looking at more years. Yeah, of course.
Yes, Pinochet was in office for much longer.
So, okay. Which one's better, right? If you have 2 years where, and this is hypothetical, okay? If you have 2 years and the poverty rate drops 30% in those 2 years, or if you have 20 years and during those 20 years, the poverty rate drops 40%. Which one's better? Obviously, the first one's better.
But that's not what happened.
I think you're just being misleading when you're saying
it was slightly more from 87 to 90.
45% poverty rate. 1990.
No, and the biggest
38.
The reason I'm asking for this is the biggest thing that attributed to that is they opened themselves up more to outside capital. That was the biggest thing that changed from 1987.
Outside capital was willing to invest because they privatized things and because they had free trade and they were getting rid of tariffs.
But so your argument though, like you don't think that like welfare programs and things help with poverty, like that you do think that, right?
Not necessarily, no. I mean they don't help with poverty necessarily, no.
Do you or do you not think they help with poverty?
Generally, no, they don't.
Okay, so what do you attribute the fact to a large portion of the reduction in poverty is directly attributed to the social spending?
I contribute the continued reduction of poverty that slowed down after they raised government spending to they still had plenty of the relatively free market.
I have an economics
increased government spending.
I have a study
slow down the drop in poverty. They did.
I have a study. No, I have a study right here that attributes 40% of the poverty reduction in the 1990s to social spending, not to the growth.
What about before that?
What do you mean? What about before that?
You're ignoring my point. No,
wait. I said though that the influx of capital did also help with that because the other 60% is the the expansion of the economy. No. I've never negated that.
I think you're still missing the point here, right? Because you're trying to go through and say, oh, look at all the welfare, after 1990, right?
Can I ask you this? Do you think it's easier to go from a 55% poverty rate to like a 45% poverty rate? Do you think that's easier than to go from like 20% to 15%? Like when it's higher, it's easier to decrease the poverty. Like we agree with that, right? Like it's going to taper off. Like
I don't think that's an objectively true claim you can make. No, not really.
You don't think that like it's going to taper off? Because there are some things that there's some just anomalies that are going to just make like the poverty rate like there's no country in the world to my knowledge that's
when you get down below like 20%, I would say that's kind of the slowing down point. Generally, from what I've seen, you can have a quicker slowing down point before at different percentages, right?
So when roughly
you would have to provide some evidence if you're going to make that claim.
I thought that we could both agree with the fact that poverty.
I disagree. Okay, I disagree there.
Okay, all right, that's fine, I guess. So I'm going to link you the study that shows that the 40% of the poverty reduction was directly linked to the social spending that increased after Pinochet left. Let's see, let's find it for you.
So let me get this straight, okay? So you're arguing that the free market reforms, which brought in private investment, lowered poverty faster than the welfare once they implement more welfare and higher government spending. Do you agree with that?
So I actually I don't necessarily agree that it was objectively faster. Like when that like those 2 years, like I'm just taking your word for it. I'm not looking at the chart, but I'm taking your word for it that from like 87 to 90 is when you're claiming like that was a faster reduction in poverty than I think that coming out of a recession, you're going to see like some quicker reductions in poverty. Like I think that most people agree with that. So like it was objectively faster. I don't necessarily attribute it mostly to the influx of capital and just the general recovery from the recession. Okay, so what I just linked to was that 40% of the reduction in poverty in the 90s was directly attributed to the social spending.
So right here, right? We don't have a lot of data that goes back before 1987. It's very difficult to find. I've found it before, but I don't know if I can find it again right now. I don't want to spend 30 minutes looking for it. But what we do have, 1989, 45%. 1990, 38%, right? Extreme poverty rate, 17 to 16, or
yeah,
sorry,
no,
17.
No, I'm not negating
12.
that, but your claim though is that the free market reforms are what alleviate poverty, and that leftist reforms or like social democratic Keynesian reforms don't. And I'm saying that that's not backed up by the data.
No, I'm not saying. Okay, so you can, if you have like a social democracy and stuff. Obviously, a social democracy, the whole idea is that you have a relatively free market, but then you have things alleviated by a certain amount of welfare. So obviously, if you leave a certain amount of markets open, then you're going to have continued improvements as long as you don't stifle that too much, right? Like, I mean, I'm not arguing that they, after 1990, if they put in some welfare, they would just lose, any reduction in poverty. But it did slow down, obviously.
No. That's why I sent the study that I just did. It is saying that 60% of the poverty alleviation was an expansion of the economy, but the other 40% was directly attributed to social spending.
And how do you measure this?
That's what the source is. I was hoping that maybe we could go through it. We spent so much time on things that Milton Friedman thought. Maybe we could go over the actual data of the time period we're supposed to be talking about. This is from the World Bank, not exactly a leftist institution.
I don't say it's exactly a free market institution either. I mean, if you want to throw in like a little bias thing, I don't care too much about bias, but if you want to throw that in there,
I'd be willing to bet they've employed far more individuals from the Chicago School of Economics than socialists, but that's besides the point.
Poverty eradication, core development.
This goes over all the different poverty reduction programs and everything. And it does say that there was inefficiency in the programs, and I think that that happens when you have programs that aren't working together, not necessarily universalized systems. I don't think that Chile's economy after Pinochet was anything remotely what I would want. That's when I'd actually like to get into some comparisons. But I think that you do see that there was like this idea that it was like after Pinochet they just stayed on the same track isn't true. The reforms were different, and they attributed to the poverty reduction.
Where's
if you just like control F like 40%, it should like substantiate what I'm saying.
The conclusion is that active social policies do matter. In fact, they explain 40% of poverty reduction. Economic growth explains the rest. Understanding. I mean, right after this isn't like a refutation of that point or anything, but right after this talks about the deceleration in poverty. So I'm no. Because you were talking about this almost an acceleration in poverty reduction.
No.
Right after here that's
I actually specifically said that like as poverty is going down, you're going to see a tapering off, like a deceleration. Are you saying that wasn't what I was saying?
No, before you said that after I made the points, right? You didn't say that before.
No, I said the bulk of the poverty reduction happened after Pinochet left. I never said it accelerated after Pinochet left. When you are done going through that, I would love to get into some comparisons with Uruguay, which has very identical circumstances, but much different governance and some pretty remarkable results.
What about Uruguay?
So Uruguay, do you concede on what I'm saying? Does the paper pass your sniff test? The 40% of the poverty reduction was attributed to the social spending, which is directly against
20-page paper just now. No.
Okay, but like what you've seen so far, do you agree with what I'm saying?
I would have to look into each individual program and find individual things in each program and maybe look through this a little bit more. My point still stands that the poverty reduction was going much quicker before they increased government spending.
Just out of curiosity, though, I mean,
free trade, private investment, the lack of price controls were still present during this time.
I would love to see like your opening statement, but like I'm pretty sure your claim was that like because of the continuation of Chicago's school policies, like that was like what led to Chile's growth. Like
did they stop all of those policies? Did they bring back price controls in 1990?
No, they didn't. No.
Okay. Did they drastically?
I'm not saying they should have brought. I'm not saying they should have brought. They massively increased taxes, corporate taxes, income taxes, VAT taxes.
That's not what I asked.
100% of that, which is tariffs are a form of taxes. So I kept going off of that. So they didn't increase taxes, but you would.
Can you answer the question? Did they drastically increase tariffs?
No, I didn't say that they drastically increased tariffs.
Okay,
I said
so the answer is no.
No, and I said what they did increase was corporate tax, income tax, VAT tax.
the policies I defended, free trade, getting rid of the price controls.
Just to be clear, so just to be clear, you support the increase in the corporate. Just to be clear, you support the increase in the corporate tax, income tax, VAT tax.
No, I never said that.
Okay, well then why are you acting like, oh well they everything that you supported, like because they didn't do everything you supported.
I never said that.
Okay, what were you just saying? You're like, so everything I supported,
you're making it sound like they continue none of the reforms that they started with the Chicago school. Which
no, they didn't. And actually, there was something implicit within the Chilean constitution that, like, if they went too far away from Pinochet's model, that they would like, just throw another military coup. I mean, Pinochet was still general of the military until 1998. So there were some checks so that they didn't go too crazy, and not exactly the flourishing democracy that I think some people say it was. But with the mild, moderate reforms, there were reductions because of that.
So why are you saying it's not attributed to the Chicago school reforms?
Raising the minimum wage, increase corporate tax. All of this was to fund social spending, increase over 200% increase on healthcare, over 200% increase on education. This was all done, and it was done to alleviate the poverty. And this
Seems
paper.
Like you don't want to answer my questions, like ever. Every time I answer a question, you just want to ask another question back, or you just want to go to another subject, or you want to act like you never said something that you did say.
I didn't not answer your question. You said you're like, I thought they continue Chicago school policies. And so I listed a bunch of things that are not Chicago school policies. Do you think that that's changing the subject?
Did they continue Chicago school policies or not?
So can we agree that there are more than...
Did they continue?
They continued some.
This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. You
They
can't
continued
answer questions.
They continued
because
some.
if you answer the questions, then it just refutes the statements you just made.
But you understand it's a nuanced thing. They continued some policies and they stopped continuing others. Do you disagree with that?
Which policies did they stop doing?
I keep telling you, they increased corporate tax rate. They reinstated the income tax, the VAT tax.
Which policies did they stop doing?
Do you think a decreased corporate tax rate, do you think that's not a policy? They added social welfare.
That is a new policy. I said which policies did they stop doing?
Okay. So let me be clear. When your policies are like, we got rid of things, like that was a lot of their policies, but they got rid of government spending. We agree, right? That was like a huge chunk of their policies.
They got rid of government. They got rid of government spending.
A lot of it, yes.
Spending still existed.
No. They got rid of a ton of government spending. So they got rid of that. And so when they reinstitute a bunch of welfare programs, I'm saying that is a change in policy. Would you agree?
Which Chicago school policy was lowering government spending? Let me see. Federal government spending as percentage of GDP. That doesn't look... See, okay, let me pull this up, actually.
Is your claim that...
This doesn't seem to support what you are saying at all when I decided to actually pull up the data on this.
So they increased like military spending, but things on like welfare programs and on healthcare and things like that, they decreased.
Let me show you this real quick.
Wait, no, okay. Is your opinion that like Pinochet increased healthcare spending? Like, is that what you're saying?
I never claimed this. I never.
Then what are you claiming?
Stop making up random claims. I'll show you.
What are you claiming then?
I'll show you what I'm talking about here.
Okay.
Right. Federal spending into the 2000s
as a percentage
until close to 2010, federal spending was declining.
But they increased. No. So they decreased things like. Wait, no.
You said increased government spending. Okay. Did it decrease since Pinochet or did it increase?
Okay.
It decreased.
I should have been more specific with my language.
I don't think you knew this. I don't think you knew this. Don't act like you didn't know this.
I knew that he increased.
I highly doubt you saw this graph and was like, "Oh, look, it decreased after Pinochet." Because I knew that
Pinochet had largely increased military spending. I didn't know he increased it that much. But do you not think that they decreased spending on education, healthcare?
Okay, so you think all of that was just due to military spending? But that's not really the point anyway.
I mean, they did things like renationalize the banks and whatnot, but I mean, those aren't Chicago policies. We're talking about Chicago school economics. I feel like you keep going back and forth.
Okay, so I was like, did they continue Chicago school policies? And then you're like, is increasing government spending Chicago school? But it decreased since then. I'm just saying.
So I should have been more specific.
False claims.
I should have been more
specific the entire time.
I should have been more specific. No, wait, stop.
You started off with conflating unified currency with fixed exchange rates, and you lied about that. You said
Friedman conflated the two. I didn't.
No, he did not.
And people are welcome to read it. It's Milton Friedman on fixed exchange rates. People are welcome to read that. I did not conflate the two. We had a very long conversation about it. But no. I should have been more specific in my language. They decreased spending on education, healthcare, things like that, welfare programs. Do you disagree with that?
You said they increased government spending.
Okay,
do you concede that you were wrong on that?
I was misinformed. I should have been more specific with what I said. I knew that he had increased military spending, and I've said that since the beginning of the debate. He increased military spending. So I should have been more specific. So wait, this is so far. So is your argument that the Chicago school massively increased government spending and that like helped their economy? Like, is that your argument? Then what is your argument?
No, I wasn't making an argument there. I was just showing
this is
your
a debate. You should make an argument then.
I was showing your argument was wrong.
My argument
is that liberalization was good.
Okay, so can we just let's be good faith about this? Can we agree that it's reductive to say did they or did they not continue Chicago school policies? Can we agree that that's reductive and lacking of nuance?
You're the one who asked the question.
You said, did they continue? You remember you kept saying I wouldn't answer it?
Yeah, because you brought up that whole subject. You were like, oh, the Chicago school policies didn't keep decreasing, or it was the welfare that was decreasing, and then it wasn't the Chicago school policies. And I'm like, did they keep the Chicago school policies, or did they get rid of all of them? Like, what was the change in the Chicago school policies?
So can we argue from what I'm saying now? Can you respond to what I'm saying now?
Sure.
They decreased education spending, healthcare spending. They got rid of like unemployment benefits, things like that. And then after Pinochet left, they reinstated a bunch of that. That is what I'm saying.
Now I'm gonna see. Now I feel like I have to fact check every single thing you're saying. Like I was gonna trust you with the stuff you're saying.
No, you should wait. No, it's in the source I have right for you. Just you can look at it right now.
I genuinely don't trust most sources people send me on Chile, because the moment I look at the full context of the data, like what I just did,
this is the world. This is the World Bank.
What I said still stands pretty much.
Okay. I mean, I don't know what to tell you that if you're not going to like trust. Like I'm showing you sources that show that they increase spending on. So you don't think that they increase like spending on education and healthcare?
Really, healthcare spending.
There's specific programs that you can look up. Here we go. You can fact check if they're real or not. Maybe that'll be helpful. Let's see. So the specific policies. Let's look.
Because like if you tell me that they decreased government spending, and then I see that they increased government spending, and I see that they decreased it, then obviously I'm going to be skeptical of the type of stuff you tell me.
So exactly, because I should have been more specific in my language. I'm 100% conceding that they decreased spending on education, healthcare, welfare programs. Do you have a response to that?
I'm trying to look this up, but it's kind of hard to find data on some of this stuff. Yeah. Chile healthcare spending over time.
So let's see, the National Program of Poverty Eradication in 1994. They had the, where is it? The Chile Solidario program. That was a program of poverty
Do they have any like
alleviation.
graphs or anything that actually show this stuff?
This is all outlined in the source I sent you.
Because most of the time when I see just the claims, I don't like just looking at that. I like looking at the overall data to see like actual trends and stuff.
Okay, there's data in here on the amount that they increased healthcare education.
Where's the thing you sent me? Is this the World Bank thing that's right here?
Let's see. Here we go. Though government expenditures in public health increased by 250%. So that's how much they increased spending on healthcare by. Let's see. Social expenditures as a whole increased by over 200%. This is what I was referring to when I said they increased government spending.
This is in the... Oh, dang it. Of course, there's going to be a million of that. Expenditures as... This is in the World Bank thing, right?
Yeah, there's a World Bank, the one that says successes and failures in poverty eradication.
Oh yeah. Where's the thing you're citing about the increase in social spending? Like what?
Okay, so is just type in 200% to Control F and you'll find it.
Okay, 200.
Are you typing the percentage sign or like?
I wasn't going to, but now I have. No, it's not. Oh, 200% as in the word.
The word, yeah, that's what I was trying to say, not the percentage sign.
The reform of labor and tax policies, including a tax increase, allowed the government to expand social expenditures by more than 200% through the 1990s.
Let's see, housing subsidies were expanded by 160%. Health expenditures were expanded by 250%. I'm trying to find the education one. This is a portion I was saying before. A tax reform was proposed in 1990, increasing taxes across the board in corporate, personal income taxes, value-added tax, and as well as elimination of tax evasion in certain sectors. Tax collection increased by 3% of GDP in subsequent years. The The government committed itself to spend 100% of the additional revenues on the social sector. Minimum wage increased by 17% in real terms.
The problem is every time I search for the overall data on these things, it's hard to find really anything.
I guess I'm curious. I guess I'm curious. Are you saying that like this spending didn't happen, or are you saying that like it wasn't effective? Because I'm really curious, like about like how I can.
If I can't actually look at the data on this.
Okay, so you're trying to say that you don't think that it happened. I guess what source would you like to see?
Well, I just want to see like some credible source that will show me like, things like income tax rates over time, welfare spending over time. And I want to contrast that with like the actual like poverty rate reductions.
I think a big part of the problem is that I think a big part of this is that it's all in Spanish originally. This is all being translated from Spanish, like things like that, like first source documents. Like I think if that's what you're asking for, is like first source, like that is part of the problem. It's all originally in Spanish, and so like some of it we do have to accept translations. If you're saying that this document is like I guess lying or inaccurate or let's see. Here we go. Social expenditure. There's a graph about social. Table on social. There's a table on. There's a table on. Here you go. There's a table on social expenditures on page 8. There you go. This should be exactly what you're asking for. This is word for word what you were asking for. So if this doesn't satisfy it, then I think that this is. Is the yearly amount of increase in spending and the overall increase in spending. The increases were in health, housing, social security, education, and other subsidies. I think those are like.
Okay. You said page 8.
Yes, the top of page 8. Table 6.
See, this starts from 1990. Like what I'm trying to do is like,
but that's what I'm saying though, is that it increased. This is the amount of increase.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying it like we're starting from 1990. What I'm trying to see is like, 1973 to 2015.
Wait, no. I think that wasn't the claim that I was trying to substantiate here. The claim was you were saying that you didn't believe me that they increased this government spending that I'm referring to.
They didn't increase overall government spending. That's true.
No, that they increased. Right. So that's why I just said the government spending I'm referring to. That's why I said government spending I'm referring to. So, and then you said you didn't believe it, and you said you wanted a table that has it broken down like by year and whatnot. I found you that table.
Yeah, I mean.
So are you not accepting it still?
No. I'm just saying I wish I could see more of this because this is just like what I'm trying to see. Again, I'm explaining this. I'm trying to see the full context, right? Just showing this 10 years isn't the full context.
No. But the claim was
the poverty reduction was. Poverty reduction was happening before. It was happening after. I want to see the entire thing.
You're doing a different.
Compare that to the actual reduction in poverty.
You're making a different claim than what I was trying to substantiate. I said that they increased this social spending, which was a break from the Chicago School of Economics. This chart describes the increase in spending. That is a break from
1990 to 2000.
Yes, and that is when the Chicago. So, do you think that increasing spending in these areas is a Chicago school policy?
No.
Okay, so this is a break from that, correct?
Correct.
So when I said before that they were breaking away from Chicago school policies, this is what I was referring to.
Okay, let's see. So the reduction in poverty goes from. So, okay, we add total social expenditures. Wait, growth rate. Annual growth, accumulated growth rate. Okay, 214. So I'm assuming that's 214%.
I'm not sure what table you're looking at, but yeah, probably. I think it's
table 214%. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
so 214% increase in social expenditure from 1990 to 2000. All right. So 1990, the poverty rate is 38%. 2000, the poverty is 20%. Okay.
18%.
So that's 18%, right? 1997 or 1987, 45%, 1990, 38%. That's a reduction of almost 10%.
You're going back to the
So they increased.
No. You're going back to something that we already said.
And they barely, over 10 years, they barely did better than the 3 years prior in poverty reduction.
You're going back to something that we
social programs are so good that in 10 years, increasing the size by 200% barely reduces poverty better than the previous.
You're going back to what before. So the more accurate, if we want to talk about more accurate, wouldn't it be more accurate to look at 1980 to 1990? And what happened during that period? Could you tell me what happened to the poverty rate? No, don't try. No. Just say
1980 to 1990. I would really love to see that. Yeah, if you
what happened to the poverty rate?
The poverty rate went up after 1982 temporarily, and then it started.
What? That's wait. So you're telling me that from 1990 to 2000, the poverty rate decreased by 18%, but from 1980 to 1990, when Pinochet was in power, the poverty rate increased?
Yeah, increased not due to free market reforms. I'm defending free market reforms.
What? Oh my goodness. Now, is it possible though that
no, you already conceded that it wasn't due to free market reforms. So I don't know why you're trying to do this sarcastic thing like, oh, I'm just going to be like, oh, maybe I can blame this on the free market reforms. You already conceded to that.
No, because you're trying to look at this like hyper specific.
Already won that part of the argument.
No, you didn't actually. Because let's be honest, if there was like unemployment benefits in place, if there were different welfare programs in place, the poverty level wouldn't have gotten to what it was during the financial crisis.
Okay.
So that was because of free market reforms that the poverty rate got so high. So let me break this down. So when you have unemployment benefits, for example, that when people go unemployed, they get benefits, right? This is something. Can we agree that that's something that happens? Now, when you don't have those in a society, and then you have a recession, and a bunch of people enter poverty because you don't have those benefits, I'd say that is because of those supposed free market reforms.
Chile poverty rate over time. Let me see here. No, I don't want child poverty rate. I want Chile poverty rate. I wish I could find that larger chart, Chile poverty rate. I mean, you keep trying to kind of take away that whole like. Every time I'm making the point, you kind of want to run away from that point as fast as possible.
What point is it do you think I'm right? I would like to meet it head on right now. Please tell me what point you think I'm right.
Because I was making a point that there was that you're like, okay, look at how good the social policies were. And I'm making a point that expanding them by 200% over 10 years barely got a better result than the previous 3 years without expanding them.
No, wait, no. Don't you think it's more honest to look at the 10 years? 1980 to 1990.
Do we have the 10 years? Sure, I would love to do that. I showed you the graph. I showed you that it started at 1987.
If I find that
be more honest, don't act like I'm lying to you or something.
I think you're being incredibly disingenuous with what you're trying to do. Let's see.
Using the given data to make a point?
No, you're trying to say that during this 3-year period, when you know that a massive recession that greatly increased poverty happened during that time.
Do you have anything before 1980? I would like this.
Before 1980? I thought we're trying to look at 1980. We're trying to look from 1980 to 1990 because we're looking at these two 10-year periods, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. That's what I meant. 1987, poverty in Chile. No, that can't be right. Poverty in Chile percentages.
So this right here is...
Oh, as a percentage. Okay, 1980. %45% in 1985. I'm not even sure if that's right.
Out of Woodlock. Why is it showing me this?
Okay, so what is your claim exactly? What is your claim that it was decreasing faster before they increased government spending? Like why? Are you saying because it was freshly off of the there was faster decreases in poverty because the recession was over? Like, what's the claim here? I don't even know
because the recession was over, there was an influx of private capital, and I do think that if you look at the holistically from 1980 to 1990, there was actually an increase in poverty. I don't think the poverty would have ever got that high if they had those welfare programs in place.
I mean, I don't care.
That's social safety. That's my claim. I mean, I can't tell you what would have happened if they had the
social safety. We've seen poverty increase drastically under systems that had social.
So let's get into that. Let's get into some comparisons with other countries. So I think Uruguay is a great comparison.
Uruguay that's what happened under Allende, isn't it?
No, wait. I don't think you're not. I don't know what you're trying to do there. So Uruguay had same thing. A military coup happened in 1973. Military dictatorship returned into a democracy almost around the same time. But the governance after is very different. So from 2004 to 2019, Uruguay was governed by almost exclusively leftist parties, explicit socialist parties, as well as Pepe Mujica, who is a well-known leftist. And the GDP per capita, things like infant mortality rate, are all almost identical between Uruguay and Chile. But what you did have, let's see. What are you looking up?
Uruguay. I mean, you're bringing up a random.
Well, they're very comparable.
An entire country, right? An entire country. There's a lot to quickly read on that, obviously.
I was just curious what you were looking up, and perhaps I could look up the same thing. Or
yeah, I was just pulling up the Wikipedia for economy of Uruguay to look at some quick pieces of information.
Cool. Let's see. An interesting piece of information about Uruguay for people listening while Ben reads is despite having a slightly lower GDP per capita, slightly lower, people from Uruguay have a higher average income than Chileans at every income quintile except for the very top. Because as I don't even think we've mentioned it yet, Chile is the most unequal country in Latin America. And it makes things like their GDP per capita less accurate, in my opinion.
So what socialist reforms did Uruguay go through that gave them these results?
Let's see. Let's look up some of them. So it has been, let's see, from 2003 to 2015, membership within trade unions has more than quadrupled. Let's see. Let's find the increase in social spending. What is your initial reading of what you've read of Uruguay so far?
I don't really see a ton of information. I'm trying to find out like when there was like some drastic change in the economy or what drastic thing there is that caused the supposed Uruguay. See that like this is a problem with like bringing up a random country because you like even told me
it's a very comparable country.
And I looked into some of those countries you mentioned a little bit, so I could know a bit about them.
Did you look up Bolivia and Brazil? Because we can talk about those.
Yeah, I looked into Bolivia for the most part. Brazil, I found less things on because Brazil, like that was less clear on what you were talking about because Brazil didn't go through like some big socialist revolution. Bolivia is more obvious because a lot of people say it's a socialist success, and obviously they had a Marxist elected as president. And,
Evo Morales isn't really a Marxist. But regardless, I think that this is more of an argument for leftist reforms, not socialist reforms. I don't think
Marxist. Yes.
Does he identify as a Marxist?
Yeah.
I was unaware of that. Maybe he does. That's really.
I mean, if you're looking at his policies and like everything throughout his thing, his presidency, you don't automatically think, full blown communist Marxist, of course, but he said verbatim, "I declare myself Marxist."
Okay, maybe he said that. That's fine. But I mean, that's less important than actual. So what is your, I guess, because Bolivia had a tremendous poverty reduction while the MAS party has been in power in Bolivia. What do you attribute that to? Because during that time, we saw nationalization of natural resources, such as the ton of lithium, enormous amounts of infrastructure spending, social spending. Roads were built to parts of the country that had never even existed before. Lots of infrastructure spending. So what is your kind of rebuttal to that? Because I think that's that and in Brazil under the Workers' Party are two very prominent examples of leftist reforms being very successful in Latin America.
Let me see if I had something pull up. Sorry, I have a ton of links. I just want to find the exact.
No, I also believe GDP quadrupled under the MAS party in.
I'm aware of all this. Let me see. I just want to find that exact link maybe that's the one that I accidentally exited. But that's okay. I've got it on my document right here. Let me sorry. I really need to close some of these links.
And just in case you're about to show a source that says they're not socialist, I'm not claiming that they're socialist. I'm claiming that there's a successful implementation of leftist reforms.
Okay, so now that I have this pulled up that I'll get to in a bit. So Bolivia, around 1996, really, they discovered a lot more natural gas. Natural gas accounts for 45% of their exports. They're very much reliant on natural gas. Now, it actually is a pretty good comparison to compare Bolivia to Venezuela, because Venezuela also became very dependent upon exports, 96% dependent upon their oil. And because of, putting all their eggs in one basket and putting all their social programs and everything into, being funded by the oil, once the oil market went down.
Not to cut you off, but that has long been my position on Venezuela. The massive amount of social spending without diversifying the economy away from oil was a huge disaster. Right. Just throwing that out there. That is also my opinion on Venezuela. And I think sanctions have part to do with it, but the big downturn happened before the sanctions. You can go on.
Okay, so comparing it to Venezuela, it's like their economy isn't quite. It's definitely more diversified than Venezuela's was, but it's still they're very dependent upon natural gases. But agriculture is the most, or most people are employed, and most people are self-employed in Bolivia. And Bolivia is actually really, really free market if you go down to the level of small to medium-sized businesses. And that's where Bolivia shines the most, honestly, in Latin America. They're extreme entrepreneurship. Like I said, most people are self-employed.
Can you send me the source that you're looking at for this?
Okay, so this is I just spouted out a ton of statistics there.
The specific portion on their middle class and lower class being very free market and being the main drive of that. Okay. Because I think it's important to talk about what I'm saying here. I'm specifically crediting Bolivia for their massive infrastructure spending. I think their nationalization of lithium has been fairly successful, and their social spending. I think that those are the three things that I'm talking about. When you say free market, I mean, there's not a specific regulation, I guess, that I'm pointing to. I'm talking more about spending on welfare and lifting people out of poverty. So I just want to make sure that your rebuttal is pointed towards that. Because this would be a lot talking about.
This is going over a lot of stuff. I mean, would you deny that? Hold on.
So I have a problem with when we say
employed and stuff like that.
I don't think that would negate anything I'm saying. No.
Okay, so that was mainly my point, right? So that's obvious. That in of itself signals entrepreneurship, right?
Okay, but that are you saying that started when the MAS party took power? Because that's when you saw the drastic reductions in poverty.
I wouldn't say that's where it started, no, but there was definitely, especially because Morales was very much pro-indigenous people. He was the first indigenous president of Bolivia. So a lot of these people, doing agriculture and stuff, he definitely lifted up pressure on them a bit, but there wasn't much to lift up, right?
What do you mean? What do you mean when you say that?
Him kind of leaving them alone, really.
I guess I'm curious what you mean by like lifting them up. Like, what did you mean by that?
As far as I'm aware, tax rates for those smaller businesses was lower after Morales. Now, I'm not sure. See, I just saw kind of like some before and after, kind of vague. So I saw that it was lower, like at a point after he was president than it was at a certain point before he was president, relatively before. So I'm not 100% sure if he was the one that lowered it. But like at the very least, I can say like he didn't really add anything onto the entrepreneurial sector, you know, the medium to small businesses.
Well, the biggest thing I think he added for them was an increase in infrastructure. Like I said, I mean, they were like literally like
no, yeah, I'm talking about like making things harder on them.
Oh, I mean, like, yeah, I agree. He made things easier for them.
Their tax rates are saying like, oh, you can't start this business here, blah blah blah, stuff like that, right?
I mean, this is like, I mean, I just feel like we're talking past each other a little bit, because this is like, you know, I say that like Denmark.
You didn't let me finish like my whole like spiel on Bolivia.
You started talking from like 1996. Okay, go with what you're saying.
Okay, so they privatized natural gas in 1994, I believe. It was 1990, somewhere between 1993 and 1994. It was privatized, and after this point, that's when the boom began. And then he actually relatively nationalized gas around 2004 to 2006. I don't remember the exact year. Now, one of the differences between what he did and what they did in Venezuela is he actually left it up to private companies, but he got in shares.
They got shares of it, like what Norway does with their oil.
Yeah, right, like Norway, exactly. Rather than like a full-blown state-owned enterprise. One of the issues with that was like, you know, Chavez like put in charge some of his friends who knew nothing about oil, you know, over the state-owned oil companies. Whereas here they left it, you know, still under relative control of private companies, and private companies are under contracts, and there's still an amount of competition, whereas that didn't exist in Venezuela. So you had this huge oil boom or natural gas boom. They found all this natural gas, and the natural gas they exported and mined and everything skyrocketed, right? It went I can even pull up a graph, and it's and let's see, Bolivia.
I think I know where you're going with this. Are you going to say that like the reductions in poverty are largely attributed to the just increase in the price of natural resources?
Yes, and I do have more things to get to on that.
Okay, all right. So let's say you're saying that like part of it is just natural resources prices went up. They were able to now. I would argue though that they were effectively able to use those price increases to decrease poverty.
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Do you contest that?
So let me hold on. Bolivia, let's just look at like GDP. Now GDP isn't really helpful. Bolivia, poverty rate, that's better.
Oh, I have the source for the poverty rate if you want it.
You have like a graph, because that's what I wanted to show.
Yeah,
I wanted to
I have a graph for
graphs.
it. Yeah, here you go.
If you could send it. Oops, poverty rate. A large, because I want to show you or show everyone how close these correlate to each other.
Okay, this should be how you can do it. You can just put in like whatever years you want.
Is this at the macro trends thing?
Do you not like that one? Question.
Oh, 1992. Okay, that should be fine.
Well, you can put in whatever years you want.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's helpful. It doesn't go back very far in Chile, unfortunately.
Okay, I'm not getting that. Let me just pull this up, all right? Because I think that'll take too long. Just trying to pull up the poverty. Like obvious, it's obvious that the GDP.
I have it. I can show it.
Right. So this is oil or natural gas in general, natural gas production and exports. And so let me put my mouse here. So right here. This is when they discovered massive amounts of natural gas. It was still privately owned at this point. When they nationalized it, was right around here, and you did actually have issues with actual production and stuff. I believe there was some strikes after this point because people were like working for the private companies and the government was coming in, and so some people weren't too happy about that. So that kind of is why this happened. But if you look at like the poverty reduction, it almost exactly correlates with this, right? But, you know, obviously they increased social spending and stuff to an extent. So that's why I wanted to look in a little bit closer and find something like what I talked about at the beginning, a synthetic control analysis, because these are one of the best ways to actually measure these policies. I really wish I could have found something like that for Chile, and I actually did. But like they admittedly, like the data was just too messed up because of, you know, there were so many changes from Allende into Pinochet, and then like there wasn't really anything useful there, and it wasn't a full analysis in of itself. But anyways, so this was a synthetic control analysis of Bolivia and this came out in 2019. It's called Skill versus Luck, Bolivia and its Recent Bonanza, by Rumel. You know what? I'm not.
You don't gotta say it.
Can
you send this?
Yes, I can. I would highly recommend reading on synthetic control analyses. There's lots of good papers on there talking about how useful they are and how they're some of the best things we've got to actually look at economic trends, and like there's things on Chavez in Venezuela, there's things on Castro in Cuba, and on Stalin and Soviet Union. Again, I wish I could have found something like that much better on Chile, but you know, that would have made things a lot easier for both of us, but it just doesn't really exist. And I will pull this up. Let me see. I don't like reading from abstracts because abstracts can be kind of inaccurate some of the time. So I want to go to the conclusion for this concluding remark. This paper intends to evaluate the relative importance of internal and external conditions on the economic bonanza Bolivia experienced. So this is referring to obviously the huge increase in GDP growth, the huge reduction in poverty. On average, let me see. Okay, the first approach attempts to construct the counterfactual of how would have Bolivia fared since 2006 if Evo Morales and his policies would not have been implemented. To construct this counterfactual, a synthetic control comprised of a weighted average of other countries is derived. The results indicate that Evo Morales caused, on average, a loss in the level of GDP per capita of around 4.7% per year since in office. They also suggested that conditions and other social indicators would not have been affected in his absence. The second approach uses a panel of countries to evaluate precise counterfactual of changing one factor, external or internal, and leaving the other constant. This approach imposes some restrictions in the terms of degree of homogeneity. I don't know if you want me to keep reading through all of this part.
I'm frankly, I mean this in the kind of way, like this isn't talking about the poverty reduction at all. This is talking about GDP.
Which I mean, obviously, poverty reduction was pretty closely tied to GDP, right? And also, it literally says, like I just read, it does discuss quote. Hold on, the
paper doesn't mention poverty once.
Social indicators, other social indicators, right?
I mean, let's see.
For social variables, the Gini coefficient, the school dropout rate, infant mortality, and life expectancy.
What are you looking at right here?
It's the synthetic control appendix 2 under.
But this, I mean,
it talks about the variable. So you just like search variable, and you can look at the variables, right? The Gini coefficient, which is pretty, that's pretty closely related to poverty. It's more about income inequality, but there are ties there. And again, GDP is relatively closely linked to poverty. You can see, but like, I mean, school dropout rate, infant mortality rate, life expectancy. So the whole thing is it's saying these things weren't affected by Evo Morales and by extension, his specific policies on increasing social welfare.
But I think, okay, so you went into a lot of effort on going through, whether or not like saying that they increased social spending was true. I hope you recognize that without, I guess, looking into at the very least the basics of how this synthetic like results came about, like you can't accept this. I mean, can you like I guess explain a little bit like why you think that these synthetic results are accurate in terms of like, oh, this is what would have happened if like Morales' policies hadn't been implemented? Like, can you get into the methodology of this process? Because I'm just from my point of view, what you're saying here is like, okay, this is what happened under Morales. We saw a lot of success, but we're saying if it had never been Morales, it would have been even more successful. And just like right now, you're being like, trust me, bro. Like you sent me the paper, so like I can go through it, obviously. But like, can you like explain the methodologies of how they came about this? Like,
because like I said, going over synthetic control analyses and actually like reading how they work and stuff, that's not a thing that you do in debates, really. Like, I can send you a paper to read on synthetic control analyses. And again, you have this paper, but obviously a paper like actually that's meant for people to have it explained to them and to say, you know, why it's good would be more simple for the average person than actually like going through and reading all the math in one thing. But the thing with, okay, to put it simply, with synthetic control analyses is like what you did before, right? You're like, oh, Brazil, and look at Uruguay, right? So you did that just at a surface level, and you're like, oh yeah, this proves my point, right?
No, and you're saying, but like your argument right now is like, oh, these guys win
at play in different countries, right? So what a synthetic control analysis does is it looks at before reforms happen in this country, and then maybe after they happen, you know, it depends on what you've got, and then it looks at other countries nearby, plus other countries that are, oh, sorry, I got a cramp on my foot. Oh, I'm sorry. That hurt. All right. Anyways.
What just happened?
Oh, I got a cramp in my foot.
Okay, hopefully you're okay. No, I hope you get what I'm saying. No.
Countries that are like comparable in their like quality of life or GDP, whatever you're looking at. And then it like controls for different variables, as many as it possibly can. And it's a much better comparison than you just saying, oh, well, I mean, Chile and Uruguay, bada bing, bada boom. There you go. No. So I just think it's really this whole thing of like, oh, you want me to be like, oh yeah, because I compared Chile and Uruguay to entirely different countries and didn't account for a single variable.
Well, we tried to account for some variables. Well, no. We tried, like I said, the reason that they stand out is the ones people usually talk about are Argentina, Uruguay, and Chile have had very similar GDP per capita growth over the same time frame. But they've had different levels of governance. And so that's why people usually compare the two. What you're saying, like with this, and I'm not saying it's inaccurate. I just need to, I just would hope that you give a little.
Yeah, I mean, is that a good explanation for you? I mean, does that explain like how they do synthetic control?
So just no. I mean, no. I understand. I think that you misunderstood what I was saying. I wasn't saying that like how did they do this. I get the process. I'm saying like is there something about like these assumptions? I guess because like there's a lot of assumptions that have to be made here, and we understand that there's a lot of like bias that can potentially come into these assumptions. Like, can we agree with that? Like when you're constructing literally like this is what a fictitious economy would have looked like under these certain circumstances. Like I personally would be I think it's a lot more useful to look at like real world examples and compare them and try to get the best comparisons possible.
I mean, this is based on real world examples, but it's actually obviously account for factors that other things don't account for.
No. Obviously, any
factors that can come into play.
Anything.
We find the biggest factors that come into play and try to account for those the best we possibly can. And that's the point of this.
No. I mean, and
that's why economists love these so much, especially economists who do this exact kind of research, we're debating.
Okay, but saying that though, like, okay, I just hope you get what I'm saying. Like, you can understand why, like, with how meticulously you went over some of the things. I mean, you wouldn't believe that social spending went up in Bolivia. Like when you're saying, like, oh, these guys they constructed a fake Bolivia and they said it did better. Boom. Like, I just hope you can understand why that's not necessarily as good of an argument as like you might think it like. Do you get what I'm saying?
No, I do. I think that that's an excellent way to do it.
No. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad way, but there's so many variables and things that can go wrong in trying to create a fictitious economy and saying like, oh, this is what could have went versus looking at two. What'd you say?
What did they do wrong then?
No, you just sent me this. Like, I mean, wouldn't the burden of proof be on you to say like, what they did right and like why this is accurate? I mean, like that would be like
in my argument. So what did they do wrong?
Well, no, your argument
of, like this might be wrong.
No, okay, wait. I think you're misconstruing what I'm saying. I'm not even saying.
You want me to go over the author? He has a PhD in economics from Duke University, an MA in economics from Georgetown University, a BA in economics from Catholic University of
Are we
America.
familiar with like what like an appeal to authority is? Like that's not necessarily like
that's not an appeal to authority. Appeal to authority is looking at authority that's not really relevant in this field. He's an economist. That's not an appeal to authority.
But do you understand why just saying, oh, this guy has, I mean, but why this person has a, you know, a degree in economics? I mean, we can agree that that doesn't necessarily prove that he's correct on everything, right? There are people that have PhDs in economics that can have wildly different things. Like just saying he has a PhD in economics, like that's not substantiate. You agree with that, right?
I mean, you claimed he could be biased. So I mean, could you prove like any bias? I'm just saying like who it was. I'm saying like, what do you want me to look at? I'm just showing you who the author is.
No. I'm saying that not even that they're biased, that there's so many assumptions that can go into this. I hope you just recognize that, like, just taking this at face value, that this can be problematic.
I think it's a lot less problematic than saying, oh, look at Uruguay and then look at
Chile.
Chile.
No, the goal was that we could
people on the right and left do all the time, right? Oh, look at East Germany and West Germany, right? Well, I mean, how many factors were at play? Like all the socialists are gonna be like, well, look, you didn't account for this factor and this factor and this factor. Oh, look at the USSR and Japan. Oh, you didn't account for this and this. You know, everyone's always going to make their own side, their own argument, and say, well, this and this and this. But there's always so many factors you don't account for. So what I'm saying is,
I don't disagree.
As many factors and account for them as possible, and then that's a much better result.
I don't disagree, but what I'm saying is that like when I brought up Uruguay, I was hoping that we could go into the comparisons difference, that you could potentially say, well, this is why Uruguay isn't a good comparison, and then I could say, you know, this is why I think it is a good comparison. And like with this, I'm saying that like I feel like you showed this, and you're like, oh, see, it's right. But I'm saying like,
I wish we could go over a synthetic control analysis of Chile, but one of the main issues with that was just like the economy was so bad under Allende that it's just really hard to actually do something there. And
but we have one here of Bolivia, and I'm saying that like it's not enough to just say, oh, we have one. I'm saying, all right, now let's go into whether or not we think this is right, what we think is right about it, what we think is wrong about it. Like that's what I'm saying here, because that's what I was I wasn't saying like, oh, here's Uruguay, here's Chile, they're both perfect. I was like, what I intended is you would say, well, this is why it's not a good comparison to show Uruguay, and I would say, well, this is why you think it is, and that's what I thought would happen. And so this is like the same thing, and I'm saying we should go through that process, and you're saying, no, we can't, we don't need to. It's a synthetic control analysis, so we don't need to do that.
No, I mean, I'm welcome for you to bring up problems with it, like.
Let's see.
But you have to actually do it, right? Because I had several synthetic control analyses of several different countries I had, but I wasn't sure if you were gonna want to be like, oh, well, I mean, I never read this before.
Well, I haven't read it before.
Wait,
I don't understand what that caricature is.
Like when you send something with just some random data in some random years, and I'm like, oh, I won't. You shouldn't want to have to look at larger context.
Well, no. I mean, every source I've sent you, I've specifically said what you should control F and what you should look for to find. You just said like, oh, let's read the conclusion of this, and like I mean, that would be like me saying like when I sent the Milton Friedman thing and saying like, oh, just read the conclusion, because the conclusion agreed with what I was saying. But like that's not what I did. I chose to like find a specific quote so that we could like go into it, because I didn't feel like just saying like the conclusion. Like,
are you talking about you don't want me to like read the conclusion of like a study that I cite?
Okay, I feel like that's a big straw man.
No, I'm asking a question. It's not a straw man if I'm asking a question. It's a clarification.
Okay, it's a clarification. No. I'm saying that I feel like would have been more helpful, because you compared it to when I've sent studies. And so I said, I think what's more helpful is when you said the study, you say like, oh, this is the specific like hard piece of like data that I'm pointing to, or the specific quote, like I did with the Friedman thing. Like I didn't say, oh, this is the author's opinion, like, because that's what I could have done. I could have pointed to the conclusion, but I didn't. I showed you the specific Friedman quote because I thought that'd be more helpful. Because if you read the guy's opinion, you'd just be like, all right, maybe I don't agree with that guy's justification. And so what I'm saying here is like when you showed this thing, like could you point to, I guess, some of the data within the synthetic analysis?
I mean, you asked me what basically what it was looking at, like besides GDP growth. I told you that. Like what else do you want to know? Like I said, you can ask me a question.
Well, like you're showing me this source, and like I'm saying, like, okay, show me why it's relevant.
Like it's in front of you.
No, exactly. And I'm saying, show me why it's relevant.
Show you why it's relevant.
Like show me the data they use to come about these things. Like
13-year-old TikTok commenter.
No. I'm saying like,
why is this relevant? Why is all of this data talking about the exact thing we're talking about relevant? Like, what does that even mean?
Okay. So you sent a study, and so I'm saying, show me the data within the study that is relevant to our conversation. Like, show me the hard data. So show me like the data that they use to come about these things. Like, point me to these things. Because you've read through this, right?
Yes.
Okay, so point me to the data that how they came about their synthetic, like some of the data that they used to come about this.
All right. So it factored in a couple different countries, and they factor in different countries for different reasons in synthetic control analyses. So in this one, they had 2 countries, which I'm not going to be able to pronounce, Niger, Peru, Togo, the UK, Uruguay, and Zimbabwe. And so what they're doing is they're taking the comparable parts, right? What might be relevant from each of these countries in order to create the synthetic country, right? So when you do this, and you're looking at also like this country, like the track they were already on, like I pointed out, this is one of the reasons I pointed out this huge increase in natural gases before Evo came into power, and then like how it was actually privatized for a few years before he came into power, the like mining industry and the natural gases, right? So we're looking at all this stuff, and the reason this is good.
What years did they privatize it in?
I think it was 94.
94.
If I'm not mistaken. It was 94 or 96, I think.
Okay, well that's so if I mean this is so poverty increased if they like privatized in 96, then poverty increased. It's why isn't this updating?
But like it has this whole like under the results section, it kind of explains things relatively well. It's like it puts in a few things like why we did this part and why we did this part, right? And it's not that long, really. Like the results section, it's like it's over like what 4 pages, but it's not the full pages. Obviously, they have like the graphs in there. But like if you go through the results and you want to actually like read, because again, like I was saying, you can't go through and read an entire study out loud during a debate. Like you never did that. You made a couple citations and you brought up the relevant parts, right? So that's what I did. I brought up the relevant parts. And then when you asked, I answered all of your questions.
To a degree. Okay, I feel like you don't want to talk about the analysis really. Let's move it back to Chile, and then we can try to put like a button on this. Or do you not want to? Or no? Did you dive into Brazil at all? Or would you say similar things for
you
Brazil?
never actually presented like a failure of liberalization in Chile. So
I mean, I would say the biggest failure was the enormous increase in poverty that happened after the recession.
All right. So do you have any proof that would have been different?
Yeah. So I mean, this is so let's break it down. So if you have unemployment, like just let's make it super simple, unemployment benefits that kick in if people lose their job. So you have this recession, people lose their job, they go into poverty, they have no income anymore. But if you have unemployment benefits, then those people, they kick in, those people can receive those benefits, they're no longer in poverty. So I think because Pinochet got rid of things like unemployment benefits and other welfare spending, that when they lost their jobs, they lost everything. Versus if those benefits had existed, they wouldn't have been in poverty.
All right, so if you go through that argument, then I just say, okay, well, where do those benefits come from? They come from taxes in some area or another. What happens when you take away taxes? That money now doesn't go to other areas, right? It overall heightens time preference.
So this is interesting.
Less, people are investing less, and right. So I could just as easily say, like, if you just want to go through this theoretical argument, I can just as easily say,
I mean,
what happened if this money was
isn't your name like Prax Ben? Isn't that like the praxeology, or trying to like reduce, go through all this? So what I would say to that is that we can.
Are you gonna let me like? Are you gonna let me finish? Or
well, you're saying that like I was trying to make this like theoretical argument with you, and then like you were like, oh, we can't make a theoretical argument. Is that what you're trying to say?
Theoretical argument. I'm saying I can just respond to you with a theoretical argument. That's what I was doing, wasn't it?
Well, you were trying to say this is why it's like not helpful. So just like respond with your theoretical argument, and then I'll like respond with my rebuttal.
Okay, right. So if you're, I can just say, well, I mean, if you're taking money out of the economy and it's not being invested in these certain places, then you might just have less jobs anyways from that. And then if less people if these people who are unemployed now would have had jobs if you had this money in the economy, or maybe they would have had more money saved up for themselves already. If it's if we're talking about like personal income tax, and again, like I mentioned, taxation heightens time preference. That means people are saving less.
So this is why I think that argument doesn't necessarily work for Chile, is because at least it works really bad for Chile, is because, because that's the argument against taxation, basically anywhere. But the argument against that would be, well, also, let's be honest, not all the funds in Chile came from taxation. They nationalized the copper industry. They had that the entire time. That was, like I said, 85% of exports during the recession. That's not necessarily taxation. That's the money coming in through exporting copper. And so
right, you can still make an argument there. Like, what if it was a private industry and you had like private companies competing, which is what happened later on in Chile. Like, they still have the state-owned industry, but now they at a certain point they allowed private competitors, right? So when you're like saying, oh, well, they kept the nationalized industry. Well, they also opened it up to private competitors. And that was a good thing for sure, because, when you have competition, then that's going to lower prices for consumers. And it also could give, you have these other companies expanding out who need people to do this job and this job and this job, that could give more jobs potentially. So, that is something that you kind of failed to introduce in there. Or
not necessarily failed to introduce. I think that when we're talking about, I was just responding more to your taxation thing, but like, I think an also important thing to bring up about Chile is that Chile is the most unequal country in Latin America. And I know, of course, you're going to say, inequality isn't necessarily bad, but the point I'm trying to make there is that when you have this enormous amount,
accounting for taxes and transfers,
do you have data that it's not? I honestly don't know. Everything I've ever seen is that Chile is.
I've noticed, like, a lot of time when people cite like income inequality data, they don't account for taxes and transfers. And there's actually both people on the right and left who do this, and then there's both people on the right and left who correct it, right? Like, someone's saying like, oh, well, we didn't see this huge drop in poverty in this certain country, therefore the socialist is wrong. And the socialists will say, well, if you account for taxes and transfers and blah blah blah, then actually it was a higher decrease in poverty and stuff like that. And then, like, looking at the United States, like, people talk about income inequality increasing, but actually, if you account for taxes and transfers over the last couple of years, or besides maybe like the pandemic, it actually, income inequality in America decreased a little bit, and it's mostly stayed stagnant over the last few decades. I'll send you that later. That's not really relevant to this, but that's why I'm asking.
So the reason, I guess, why I think that argument wouldn't necessarily hold up, at least with what you're saying, is just because during that time in Chile, they had very little taxes and transfers, and so I feel like the inequality that was really high wouldn't really change.
I'm talking about like today.
What'd you say?
I'm talking about today, like you said, inequality.
But we're talking about during the recession. We're talking about, like, because my argument was that, like, that was a failure of the privatization, or at least the cut in the welfare programs. Remember, like, we were talking about during the recession, and so like there was very, very little taxation. So like the inequality would remain very high during this time, even if you adjust for taxation, because there was like virtually none at that point, right? Or not virtually none, but there was very little taxation.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what I'm saying then is that the taxation is almost like you're almost making my argument for me a little bit, is because, if there was increased taxation and then that went to spending, then that probably would have lifted more people out of poverty. And that's kind of my argument, is that, like, if they had been doing that at that time, then the poverty rate wouldn't have gotten as high as it actually did. Because that's kind of the thing, is that, like, obviously you're going to have, economies are going to have their ups and downs. And that, that's part of my argument about, like, why their poverty rate started to drop, is that as they came out of the recession, things started to bounce back. And that was actually part of that World Bank study that I sent you, is that, like, in the 90s, they did have, there was a recession internationally. But Chile didn't actually feel a lot of the brunt of that. And it's because they had saved during the ups in their economy. And then when it went down, their social spending remained the same. I think it actually might have went up a little bit. And so their poverty continued to go down. And so I think that could have been the same thing in Chile, is that, like, oh, well, things were going good. They could have been saving unnecessarily. And then when things started to go down, they could have increased the spending on those issues. And then, this is Keynesianism 101.
So why do you think the unemployment rate increased so much around 2000?
In Chile?
Wait, I think that is unemployment rate, age 15 and over, adult persons. Yeah.
Okay, why do you think it increased that much?
I don't know. I'm asking you.
Did they have an economic downturn?
economic downturn in 2000. I don't think they had one in 2000. No.
I mean, if their unemployment rate went up a bunch, I mean, it was probably like close to an economic downturn. I don't know.
It was pretty much dropping since before 1990, quite a bit, and then like after 1990, it sort of stagnated a bit, and then kind of went down, kind of went up, and then there was pretty much a big increase in 2000, and it kind of like stayed up there for a while until more after like 2010, and then you didn't really see a big increase until COVID.
Okay, so I'm looking right now. This is on Statista. So you're saying unemployment? It looks like
look at St. Louis Fed. They have the best like overall compilation.
Okay, can you send it to me?
Oh yeah, sure.
And so what are you saying? Why did their unemployment go up in 2000?
I'm asking you because like this whole thing, I'm like, okay, the unemployment was handling unemployment is so much better, after you have the like the social transfers, but I don't know. Looking at the data, I don't really see that. And if there wasn't like an economic,
I didn't say unemployment. I said poverty. Obviously, unemployment's going to go up, but that's what I'm saying. Like that's the example I used was unemployment benefits. Okay. So like their poverty continued to go down during that time, if I'm not mistaken, didn't it?
Like I said, like we both established before, it's very hard to find data on poverty for Chile for some weird reason.
But not after 87.
That was like 87 to like 2000 something. So yeah, there is that. That's probably the best we have.
No. But I guess what I'm saying is that like, so you were saying, oh, unemployment went up here, but that wasn't what the way that you would respond to my argument. I guess would be you'd say, oh, poverty went up here, and so see this social spending, it actually didn't help with poverty. Because saying unemployment went up, because unemployment would have gone up during the recession, but I'm saying because having those unemployment benefits would have helped reduce the amount of poverty because poverty was so high.
I was just asking you why you thought the unemployment rate went up. Like I wasn't making a gotcha moment or anything. I was just looking over it.
I don't know why it did, but I don't think that necessarily. I guess you're saying you weren't trying to refute it. So I guess how would you refute what I was saying then?
Poverty rate. Let me go through it. Okay. Let me just. What was your argument again?
That the poverty rate wouldn't have been as high in Chile if there had social spending to alleviate some of the mess that would have come from the economic downturn.
Oh yeah, I already like pretty much gave my response to that. I said that's kind of like a big claim to make without any evidence per se. And then from like the theoretical perspective, you just argue that you could just argue that those taxes taken out to actually fund like the social that would have been taken out to fund the social services. Because like what you said kind of didn't make any sense. You're like, oh well, I mean they didn't have higher taxes at this point, and they had the money coming in from the copper mines and stuff. It's like, well, yeah, but in order to have like the equivalent of what they had later on, the 200% increase, they obviously would have had to increase
No, of
taxes.
course. And they did increase taxes. And we saw GDP continue to go up though. Economic expansion continued to go up even though they increased taxes. And that was kind of, what I was saying. And I was saying that because Chile is such an unequal society, because you were saying like, oh, well, if we adjust for taxation, then, the inequality closes. I'm saying, oh, that's the problem is that Chile didn't have that at the time. And so I'm saying if they had that taxation, that would have redistributed the wealth, so to speak, down to the bottom people. There would have been less people in poverty at the time. That's what I'm saying. And yeah. And I think that, you pointed to something there when you were saying, the increased social spending and you were saying, oh, this could have a negative impact on GDP potentially.
No, I thought when you said Chile was like the most unequal, I thought you were talking about like today.
I'm honestly pretty sure like throughout like under Pinochet.
I was just asking like today, is it the most unequal, and is that accounting for taxes and transfers?
I'm pretty sure today it is still considered the most unequal country in Latin America. Not the world, I'm saying Latin America. And then under Pinochet, I know it was definitely within either the top one or two unequal countries in Latin America.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty normal after a recession, and pretty much most of his presidency was after.
Well, so that's what I'm saying, though, is that like poverty went up so much during the recession, and that if they had those social programs, then the poverty wouldn't have gone up so much. And like you're saying, oh, well, if they'd had the taxes, but I think we have evidence from later when they did implement higher taxes that it didn't have a negative impact on economic growth, that economic growth continued to go up and poverty continued to go down.
Yeah, for the most part, I would just want to see evidence on that. That's kind of like a big argument that I would have to like go through if both of us were to argue that and like try to argue it from a more empirical basis. We'd have to actually go through.
But that's the
data supporting each side or whatever.
That's the data we've been talking about. We both agree the poverty has been going down since Pinochet left office, right? Poverty has been going down.
Yeah, it was going down before too.
Okay, but no. But I feel like you were saying you need data to show that, and so we have.
No. I'm saying I need data to show that it would have been better off with these social programs during the recession. Actually, during the recession.
Okay, but no. But I'm talking about just during the after Pinochet part. So we saw poverty continue to go down. We saw the taxes go up, and we saw the GDP growth continue to go up. And so I'm using that as
the poverty reduction rate drop. So going through this argument,
the rate dropped, but the poverty continued to go down.
Yeah, so that would be my rebuttal to that. The rate of the poverty reduction dropped. So that's like the most empirical data we can get out of that, like out of what both of us have gone through. Maybe we can find more on that.
Not if we look like
we've gone through. Like that kind of would be my argument. Because that just shows like, yeah.
No, but this is inaccurate because we know that the poverty rate did go up though. Like if you're just shortening the time frame to say, oh, the poverty rate was slower. But like if we expand the time frame from when Pinochet from 1980 to 1990, this is what I'm talking about.
No, you're saying it would have performed better with the social programs, but after the social programs, it didn't. That's what we're talking about, right?
So you're looking at a different time period, though. I'm talking about during the recession when the poverty was. I'm saying it never would have went that high.
Yes, but we don't have data on what the social programs would have done during the recession.
But we do have data on what they did once they implemented social programs. And
yes,
once
wait.
You're coming off. No.
I'm saying we have
data on what happened. No, wait. Stop for a second. Stop for a second. No. There was one last. There was something super important. No. We have data from the 1990s when they did go through a recession and they kept spending and poverty didn't go up. That's what I was saying. And so that is the example. That is because obviously we can't go back.
Poverty would go up. I didn't claim that. So if that's what you're saying, that's completely.
No. I'm saying that so that's the example is that so when they had a recession and they had the social spending, the poverty didn't go up. But we also have this example when they had a recession and they didn't have the social spending and poverty did go up.
See, this doesn't. What you're saying literally makes no sense. It literally makes no sense. Like with what we're talking about, okay? Because you keep like circling back, right? So, okay, we're talking about what the Social Security would have, or what the social welfare would have done during the recession. During the recession, all right?
Yes.
Obviously, poverty increased. We know that. We did not have this high social welfare during this time. After we were recovering from the recession, we still didn't have this high social welfare. Poverty was decreasing. And then after, it kept decreasing, but at a slower rate. And then when I say, oh, well, we don't have the data to look at it during the recession, you say, oh, well, look, we have it after. And then when I say we have it after, you say, oh, well, what about during? See, you're just going in circles.
No. I'm saying the comparison, though, is that if we want to compare it, because obviously we can't go back in time and see what would have happened. But I'm saying
the comparison we have was after the recession, before and after the social welfare programs, and that's in my favor. That's the only comparison.
It's not in your favor though, because poverty was higher. No, but wait, hold on. So you said you acknowledge, right, that the recession caused poverty to go up, right?
Yes.
Okay, but then there was an international. This was in I believe it's like 1999. You brought up the unemployment, but the poverty rate didn't go up. Like we saw the unemployment rate went up a bunch, but the poverty rate didn't.
Wait, I never claimed there was a recession.
No, but there was an economic downturn. We were talking about the unemployment rate going up, but the poverty rate didn't go up. So before, when the unemployment rate went up, the poverty rate also went up a bunch. But now, when the unemployment rate went up, the poverty rate didn't go up a bunch. That's what we're talking about.
Which economic downturn was at that time?
Was it
like nearly as bad? Like, was it nearly at the scale of the 19? Like, I mean, we know like today, looking back, like the 82 one was the worst one they've had since then.
It was no. It really no. Right. I don't think it was as bad, but poverty didn't go up at all. Am I wrong on that?
What year was this?
Let's see. This was the data that you showed me. It was so it looks
I was
like
just showing you data. I wasn't claiming, like, I was asking you why you believe unemployment went up.
Yeah.
I never claimed that there was a recession.
No, but you asked me what data are we looking at. So I'm talking about right here. In this is July of 1999. That's when you saw the unemployment rate go up a whole bunch. But if I'm not mistaken, the poverty rate did not go up that much. Could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, like we said before, like we already established, it was kind of hard to.
Not during the 90s though. There's poverty rate. The data is available during the 90s, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, if you can find it, then send it to me.
Yeah, it's right here. It's macro trends.
The poverty, at $1, $1.90 a day. What you mean? The one that, like we saw in the data I went over earlier that started in 1987. You could see like the extreme poverty rate. It was decreasing along with the poverty rate, but the extreme poverty rate was decreasing at a much lower percentage.
So I just sent you. Works, right? I just sent you the data showing the Chilean poverty rate, and so we can see that even though they had the giant unemployment spike in 1999, there was not a giant spike.
Where is this? Where's this data? Like I
put it in the
poverty rate 2009 to 2017.
Oh, wait. You can change the days. Okay. Are we looking at something different?
Okay, so like what recession was this? What year was it?
So it was in 1999. That's when we saw the massive unemployment spike. So that's from the.
So you're not making a claim that there was a recession.
No, we're talking about the unemployment. The unemployment rate went up a bunch. So the unemployment rate in 1999 went up to 10%, but we didn't see the poverty rate go up even remotely like that.
Poverty rate 1990, 28% to 30%. I mean, see, the thing is right here, like if we want to go into trying to compare this exactly, and then like we don't even know why the unemployment rate happened. I mean, we do see like poverty went up a little bit right here.
It went up a tiny bit, but not remotely. And then it stayed down. And even though, because we can look at the unemployment, but if we look at the unemployment rate stayed pretty high up until 2004. Then it started to go back down. But the poverty rate was going down the whole time.
Yeah, my thing is here, like you're trying to say that just because like during this random thing where we see unemployment increase, we didn't see a huge increase in poverty, which then we would have to go through and look at proportions, the poverty back in the other recession, and then the employment, compare the actual proportions and everything, and then like how severe the other one was as far as everything else goes. That there's like a lot to go into there. I don't think this necessarily proves your point. Like I think the best comparison we have is before and after the social welfare reforms, but we're gonna have to wrap this up because it's past when I wanted to be done with this.
Okay, I mean that's fine. I think that